Chapter 1077. Texas. Johnny Blaze, whom Chenong and Steve were looking for, was performing stunts here. Today, Johnny Blaze's performance was in the countryside of Texas. The rednecks here were conservative, which made the traditional circus more popular. It was conservative, rural, backward, and the Texans were ignorant and grumpy. This was the Lone Star Republic of rednecks, racists, and the KKK. This should be the best place to preserve the American tradition. Chenong leaned against the stands with a bottle of beer in his hand, ignoring the fiery circus in front of him. He asked Rogers next to him, "Do you feel a familiar smell?" "I'm a Northerner," Steve said. Although the Federation has been bridging the conflict between the North and the South after the Civil War, a Northerner can never truly agree with the spirit of the South. "I prefer an open America, not a puritanical conservative country. So yes, I'm not interested." Chenong raised his beer, clinked glasses with Steve, and drank. "One last question. What's the real reason you've been letting Ebony Throat do what he wants?" Steve asked. Chenong silently tapped his finger on the railing in front of him. After thinking for a long time, he told Steve, "You saw through it. Yes, whether it's me or Cyclops, the forces behind us, the Revolutionary Alliance and SHIELD, have been letting Ebony Throat do what he wants. Otherwise, we'd have to deal with him first, not those who have been bewitched by him. But at the same time, we also need him." "What do you need him to do?" Steve suppressed his dissatisfaction and asked, "I don't understand why you always use this and that. This is politics." Chenong smiled helplessly and said, "We need to use him to muddy the waters, and then after it settles down, we can see more clearly. To put it bluntly, we want to use him to vet some forces that are outside the mainstream. Earth is too complicated. Before we have showdown with Apocalypse, we need to know the attitudes of those forces. So, Ebony Throat is a fuse, a sign of judgment, a test for other forces, other people, superheroes, or villains. We need him to stir up trouble on Earth, stir up those who are hiding in the mud, and let us know their attitudes and positions. Standpoint is very important. They have always avoided establishing their own position, but as a diplomat of the HRL, I and Nick Fury need to determine their position and then decide who to befriend and who to eradicate. You're treating him like a touchstone." Steve could not tell if he was happy or angry. He just said calmly, "You want him to help you find the enemies you need to eliminate one by one? Before the final battle, we can't allow their faces to be blurred." Chenong nodded. "For example, Johnny Blaze. He's actually Ghost Rider's representative. We need to find out Ghost Rider's stance through him. Was he a chess piece completely under the control of that demon, Mephisto's? Furthermore, it was a party with its own will. Their attitude, their stance, their affiliation." Chenong pointed at Johnny Blaze, who had attracted a lot of cheers when he appeared. "This is the tacit understanding between me and Nick. So we're here to test his stance." Steve asked. "A better way to put it is to assess his threat," Chenong said softly, then put down the bottle and applauded loudly in the direction of Johnny Blaze, who was about to cross the ring of fire and the high platform. Steve wanted to ask more clearly, but he was interrupted by the surrounding crowd. In the midst of the cheers, Johnny Blaze jumped up, crossed the huge barrier between the high platforms, and landed successfully. The atmosphere of the scene became even more enthusiastic. The audience shouted excitedly at Johnny Blaze. Watching Johnny Blaze leave the stage surrounded by the staff, Chenong and Steve had to get up and quietly walk backstage. "Sorry, this is not allowed." Before the staff could finish, he was forced back by 2 special IDs with eagle emblems. "We have some things to ask, Johnny Blaze," Steve said. Please come in." The staff was a little hesitant and stammered. He stepped aside and emphasized, "Johnny Blaze is a popular stunt driver here. He didn't cause any trouble, did he? We just have some things to ask him alone." Steve had to comfort him. "It's nothing serious." After getting off the racing track, Johnny Blaze sat alone backstage, reading a religious book. Chenong walked up to him, glanced at the title of the book, then sat opposite him and said, You can't find out the true nature of God by reading this kind of book. Johnny raised his head and looked at him in surprise. Chin Ong continued, You have to talk to him personally. You have something to talk to me about? Johnny put down the book, glanced at him, and then turned to look at Steve, who was wearing a cowboy hat and leaning against the side with his head lowered. Because Steve was too well known, or in other words, there were very few people in the United States who did not know him, so it was Chin Ong who was talking to him. Let's talk. Chin Ong put a bottle of wine on the table. Let's talk about Mephitos. Johnny Blaze was instantly alerted, and a strong sense of vigilance rose in his heart towards Chin Ong. He whispered, Why did you mention this demon? For someone who had just experienced a thrilling performance, and when he stopped, he was still holding Faust in his arms. Isn't it natural to talk about this topic? What's more, only by coming into contact with the demon can one get closer to God. Chin Ang's words had a double meaning. Are you really so free that you don't watch the circus outside and talk about religion with people in the middle of the night? Johnny Blaze questioned. What's more, God is getting further and further away from me. I can't see him for a long time. Believe me, you've never been so close to him, Chin Ong said calmly. Then what is Mephitos? Johnny asked. The question that God uses to test people is also the weapon that God uses to test humans. Legend has it that ancient Babylon once built the Tower of Babel in an attempt to ascend to heaven on its own. God made it so that people could not speak and could not unite. Probably from that time, there were demons. So Babylon fell under the hands of the demons. From this, we can see that angels and demons are both God's creations. Chin Ong looked at Johnny Blaze's slightly more serious expression and chose to continue. I also know a little more. In some absurd legends, the Creator will give people all kinds of tests to determine if they are His most perfect creations. Thus, when every civilization develops to its most prosperous stage, it will face challenges. When the humans on Earth built the Tower of Babel, the Creator's adopted Son, the Messiah, came to the world. He collected the darkest part of human souls and ignited it with fire. The burning soul became the spirit of vengeance. They swept the earth and interrogated the souls of humans. Thus, the Tower of Babel collapsed. The tribulation fire fell from the sky, and the raging waves of Nabistan came. Babylon perished. The spirit of vengeance burned the sins of humans. From the original sins of humans, 7 powerful spirits of vengeance were born. They sank into the abyss and burned into a hell of fire. They far surpassed their own kind, so they were given an identity by the Messiah. They judged the souls of sinners on his behalf and interrogated the original sins of humans. They were called demons and devils. Mephitos was one of them. But interestingly, demons were once a test for humans, but they were also the creations of the Creator. Then, here's the interesting thing. According to the rules, when demons are strong enough to attract the attention of the Creator, they also have to face their own test. So, the demons that were created to test humans also had to accept the test. This is truly an interesting irony. But the demons didn't think this was an irony. On the contrary, they were very afraid. Mephitos was the same. Thus, an internal war between them occurred. Every demon and devil wanted to seize power from their own kind, and at the same time, reduce the overall strength of the demons and devils to delay the arrival of the test. After the war, some demons and devils failed, while others became stronger. But they were still afraid, so they wanted to explore the secret of the Messiah's creation, the original secret of the demons, in case the Messiah took away their power with a wave of his hand. Thus, they chose to search again the spirit of vengeance. Some unfortunate humans were chosen as the carriers of the spirit of vengeance because of the characteristics of their souls. These humans were called Ghost Riders. Chapter 1078. Actually, we've dealt with each other before. Chin Ong leaned back in his chair and relaxed. St. Milica Church, the San Venganza contract. You and your girlfriend Roxanne got into big trouble. She actually had a huge insurance policy on her. That was 10 years ago. Who would buy insurance from a communist country on the other side of the Pacific Ocean? At that time, I was the only insurance investigator in North America, and the total annual business was less than that of a small town in China. Realization dawned on Johnny Blaze. He pointed at Chenong and said, "You're the insurance investigator." Roxanne told me that she later went to handle the investigation procedures for insurance fraud. After all, the insurance regulatory agency in America doesn't accept compensation for being kidnapped by a demon. Chenong spread his hands. "She's been insured by your company," Johnny Blaze said. "But I don't remember meeting her. After all, our company recognizes compensation for mysterious and supernatural injuries. Many customers become our company's regular customers after coming into contact with that. No one wants to die without knowing why. When I arrived to investigate, you'd already gone to save her. So I didn't meet her, but I saw Carter, the previous ghostwriter. I witnessed his negotiation with Mephitos. This old guy always wanted to exchange his soul for it, and agreed to many harsh conditions for it, but he failed in the end. A few years later, I saw him in hell. He's not doing well now. He changed the contract to a fake one, and almost killed Roxanne," Johnny Blaze said angrily. "But he also tricked the witch devil. After being seriously injured by your trial's eye, the witch devil came back to find us. It wanted to kill the old and weak ghostwriter and take back the contract. But it didn't know that Carter had already made a deal with Mephitos and took back its youth. We worked together to kill it, to prevent it from resurrecting in hell. You know, demons can't be killed easily. I trapped it in a voodoo doll, and it died a few years ago because of an accident. What kind of accident can kill a demon?" Johnny Blaze didn't believe it. "Even the trials, I can only banish them. Didn't the spirit of vengeance that accompanied you claim to be indestructible?" Chenong said, "You should know very well that there's another soul in your body, a vengeful soul burning with hellfire. But in the 1950s in Tibet, there was a ghostwriter known as Nima who fought against the invaders and protected the slave masters. The trials I caused his soul to be judged, and even the spirit of vengeance in his body was destroyed." Johnny Blaze was silent. The spirit of vengeance that accompanied him told him that it was true. "Carter also told me about Ghostwriter. Something about signing a contract with Morpheus. Ghostwriter's mission was to bring those evil souls back to hell. But there's something you might not be clear about." Johnny Blaze frowned. "What?" Many of his words are wrong. For example, Ghostwriter didn't have to sign a contract with Morpheus to be born. Instead, Morpheus had used the contract to control many ghostwriters. "You've always thought that your power comes from that demon." "Yes, part of it is, but most of it actually comes from the spirit of vengeance in your body." "Is that the story you just told me?" Johnny Blaze asked. "Ghostwriter is the predecessor of the demon, created by God?" No. Ghostwriter was created by the demon, and the spirit of vengeance was created by the Messiah. Morpheus combined the spirit of vengeance with the human soul and used the human soul's sin, weakness, and complexity to corrupt the purity of the spirit of vengeance. In other words, the demon corrupted and controlled your soul, and then used it to control the spirit of vengeance in order to achieve his own goals. If the dependents created by the Messiah are called angels, then the spirit of vengeance was created by the Messiah to judge and test the Babylonians' provocation against the Creator. After the angel of vengeance destroyed Babylon, the 7 most outstanding ones were given a mission to test and judge the souls of sinners forever. They were the 7 lords of hell later, the primeval demons. After that, because of the war, they split into 2 camps, demons and devils. They devoured each other, and the strong preyed on the weak. The weak primeval demons were all sealed, including the one that became your spirit of vengeance, Zathanos. Morpheus defeated Zathanos and took his power, but there was still a part of Zathanos' power that Morpheus couldn't take, so he thought of a way. At the very beginning, after the spirit of vengeance was created by the Messiah, they could devour each other, but after becoming a demon, he lost this ability. And he also wanted to know the secret of the Messiah's creation, so he used Zathanos' soul as the spirit of vengeance. It was originally one of the most powerful spirits of vengeance. He bestowed the spirit of vengeance, Zathanos, on his dependents, and then continuously corrupted and controlled it through human souls, discovering its secret. This is where you came from. The spirit of vengeance didn't belong to Morpheus, but you did. The part of Ghost Rider that belonged to you was the part that was corrupted by Morpheus. On the contrary, the part that you thought belonged to the devil was actually an angel. The devil was an angel, an archangel at that. But after the betrayal of the devils, their angel identity was corrupted. But Morpheus stripped Zathanos of the power of the devil and restored him to the original spirit of vengeance. It was precisely this corruption that allowed him to return to his angel identity and become the most powerful spirit of vengeance. What you said is very interesting, but there's no evidence. Johnny Blaze pretended to be nonchalant, concealing his shock. You think those monsters burning with hellfire are angels? What do you think angels are? Chenong asked. Those winged humanoid angels with wings on their backs and infinite holy light and majesty? That's a matter of the New Testament. After a legion that belonged to Sephiroth was transferred to the vicinity of Earth, matters related to Earth's religion were handed over to them to handle. So the angels became them. They were actually subordinate to the Plague Legion. Star spirits, the souls of stars. And in the Old Testament, when a Messiah was still directly interfering with Earth, the angels were those monsters. A lump of flesh with countless eyes and tentacles, a ray of pure light, a bubble without any shape, or a lion, an eagle, a calf, or even a wheel, an incomparably huge wheeled aircraft that looked like a star. Chapter 1079. If the demons are angels, Johnny Blaze objected. They can't even enter the church. Because they have sinned, Chenong said. So they are punished by the Messiah. Because they tempt people to fall and sin. Johnny Blaze asked, God gave them the duty to judge sinners, but they tempt people to fall? No. You misunderstood me. First of all, God didn't give them the duty. It's the Messiah. God didn't do anything. He just created the Creator. And the Messiah is the one who arranged everything. You can also call it fate. It's not the demons' sin to tempt people's souls to fall. In fact, it's their duty. They created demons to divide and punish humans. Entrapment is also law enforcement. Their real sin is to kill each other and plunder power because they fear the judgment of the future. The Messiah appointed 7 ancient demons, but they harmed each other. This is a challenge to the Messiah's arrangement, so they are guilty. They betrayed the Messiah's arrangement for them. No leader will care if you cross the line a little bit, or should I say, exceed the line in gray areas. Only when the leader wants to deal with you will it be evidence of your crime. However, every leader will care if you challenge the authority of others. That's why they are unlucky. And if you want evidence, the evidence is in what you just said, Chenong said, staring at him. Johnny Blaze recalled what he had just said and still did not understand. Chenong had to remind him. You just said that demons and devils can't enter the church. In fact, based on my experience dealing with the rampant cults in North America, even the devil's kin can't enter the church. Only their worshippers, demon believers who have not been assimilated by their power, can enter. But you can come and go freely in the church. This is a very obvious proof that you are partly an angel, even if you are an angel of vengeance. So, God didn't give up on me, Johnny Blaze said excitedly. He didn't give up on my father either. Will his soul go to heaven? Wait a minute. God didn't give up on anyone. No one will give up on their property. I guarantee that you will belong to him from head to toe, from soul to body. But he just doesn't care. You're just small amounts of money. He's not a saver either. He didn't store your souls in heaven. God is a financial manager who likes to invest and to constantly operate his assets. Therefore, your souls will generally continue to be invested into the operation. Continuous investment, savings, and whatnot, there is no such thing. This is not in line with the principles of financial management. You just said that the spirit of vengeance is an angel. So, Chun-Ong flipped through the little notebook and said, You belong to Messiah's operations management. It's the capital that temporarily belongs to him. What about the church? Johnny Blaze still wanted to say something. Whether the soul belonged to God or not was very important to believers. Although Johnny Blaze was not a believer, as a traditional American and Southerner, he still cared about this. This was also why he was so determined to get his father's soul back. From this, it could be seen that the capital that Messiah helped Chunong manage was indeed developing well, and the management level was very high. For example, Apocalypse Chun himself, his management level was very low. In Messiah's hands, humans were happy to become his property, but in Apocalypse's hands, the property resisted very fiercely. Of course, there was also the reason why Apocalypse's investments were different. Apocalypse's capital was used for experiments. Small things like capital appreciation had always been handled by managers like Messiah. The Four Horsemen were the functional heads of Apocalypse's company, and the specific matters were handled by them. In fact, Chunong felt that Messiah did a good job. The inferior asset that originally had no experimental value, the monkey, had become a high-quality asset with high experimental value. Humans. The speed of appreciation could be said to be very fast. Messiah could be said to be very capable. Chunong solemnly taught him, "The church is not managed by God." Let me ask you, who is worshipped in the middle of the church? Who is hanging on the cross? Who established the church? Who is the one who redeems humanity? My Lord Jesus, Johnny Blaze replied. That's right. What temple, what God to worship? A church that worships Jesus, you let God do things. That's not reliable. So, you have to understand your own position. You are controlled by Mephitos and have a symbiotic relationship with angels. But in the end, you are a human managed by Messiah. Ownership belongs to God, but control belongs to Messiah. Johnny Blaze was a little confused by Chunong's words. He vaguely felt that there seemed to be nothing wrong with the logic, but from the perspective of his understanding and beliefs from the Bible, these words were almost treasonous. But God and Jesus are not of this nature. Johnny Blaze emphasized, you are an administrator in the system. It is not suitable for you to question or object. Chunong tapped the table and said, you are half an angel. An angel is a spirit in service. Even if you are a civil servant of God, as a civil servant, it is not suitable for you to mention matters of faith. How faith is a matter for believers, to put it bluntly, it is a matter for humans. Humans' understanding of Messiah. Is this something an angel like you should mention? Believers can question whether God is benevolent or not, and whether Messiah is bright or not. But what are you, an angel, questioning? When God sends you to test humans, you also have to ask, isn't this in line with the spirit of the Bible? Which side are you going to sit on? Humans will die sooner or later, so you won't end up as a human. Then, when there's a conflict between the identity of an angel and a human, how are you going to recognize your own position? Johnny Blaze's mind was a mess, and he felt as if his worldview was shattering. I am a ghostwriter, a human who signed a contract with a demon, born and raised as a human. How did I become an angel? For the sake of life and death in heaven, shut up. Putting away the random thoughts in his mind, Johnny Blaze said woodenly, how do you think I should recognize my own position? Of course, your position belongs to whichever side your butt is on. Humans are just a temporary stool for your butt to sit on, and angels are your seat for life. After you die, Messiah will deal with you according to God's position. How should I recognize the decision in my heart? Johnny Blaze asked, what's the difference between the positions of an angel and a human? Chunong picked up his beer and said, I'll just ask you one thing. God wants Armageddon. Do you support it? Johnny Blaze was speechless. Destroy the world. Kill all humans and create another world. According to the Old Testament, there aren't many people in the Book of the Lamb. Of course, that's not the case in reality. But Armageddon is a topic you can never avoid. Are you going to judge humans as an angel on behalf of God? Or are you going to be judged as a human? You see, there's a huge conflict between identities. Chunong said, for example, the avenging angel was ordered to destroy Babylon and the Tower of Babel. This is the job of an angel. A person can have a position, but as an angel, your position must be the same as God's. I don't know. Johnny Blaze hugged his head and said, I don't know what to do. Are you here to ask me this as an angel? He looked up and asked, You shouldn't be asking me this. Are you here to ask me this as an angel? He looked up and questioned, You shouldn't be asking me this. I'm God, I can't ask. Chunong looked up at the sky, speechlessly. I'm not an angel. I'm just here to ask you your attitude as an organization that protects humans, Chunong said. Do you know, Mephithis joined an alliance that tried to destroy half of the life in this universe. Their first step was to prepare to destroy humanity. And you're the most powerful ghost rider controlled by Mephithis. So I need to know, as a member of the human race and a soul controlled by Mephithis, what's your stance? Furthermore, as half of you are angels and half of you are humans, what is your stance in the later judgment day? God is preparing Armageddon, and humans are going to resist. Do you support it? Johnny Blaze said dejectedly, I can't answer these questions in a short period of time. We don't care about your answer, because the answer will always change. I just want you to know, your actual actions will be your final answer. After we step out of this circus, an old man with a silver cane will walk in. He will invite you to save the universe, and the first step will be to destroy us. And when you appear on the battlefield, we will determine our attitude toward you and all the ghost riders. Think about it carefully. Chinong stood up and said, You'll eventually come face to face with us, but if your will wants to resist Mephithis, we'll help you get rid of its control. If not, then we're enemies. After saying this, Chinong turned to meet up with Steve and walked out of the circus. What did you say to him? Steve asked. I heard a lot of secrets about religion. You actually think that Apocalypse is the real God. He's not. To angels, he is. The Human Revolutionary Alliance isn't afraid of a galactic warlord. Thanos is nothing in front of us, even if he has many allies. What we care about is Apocalypse. So this attitude is the most important. As for the others, Johnny Blaze and the other Ghost Riders won't choose Mephithis. They can even resist that demon for a San Venganza contract, not to mention for all of humanity. But in Apocalypse, will those angels, including Mephithis, Satan, and Ghost Riders, rebel against their creator? Although demons and devils have their own stance, it's still hard to say. After all, they've never challenged the Messiah head-on, not even the most rebellious demon. Chapter 1080. The former circular spaceship headquarters of the Holy Spear Bureau was now the eastern base of the Brotherhood of the Holy Shield. Natasha walked into the circular headquarters. This spaceship, which was still of very advanced technology 6 years ago, was now outdated. There were not many people in the headquarters. Most of them were former staff of the Holy Spear Bureau. After the purge, some of the Holy Spear agents who did not pass the investigation chose to continue working here. Natasha was carrying a sealed metal container. Through the blue energy liquid inside, one could see strands of crimson substance swimming in the energy liquid. It was very strange. Coming to the center of the circular headquarters of the Holy Spear Bureau, the researchers had been waiting here for a long time. They took the metal can and put it into a circular machine. Like an armillary sphere, 9 metal rings were interlocked to form a complicated celestial body model. The metal can was locked in the center. After connecting the energy, the 9 metal rings began to rotate slowly. The dark red matter in the metal can began to move along the 2 vertical axes of the machine. It was like dark red lightning jumping on the machine. The researcher in charge of the experiment introduced to Natasha in a low voice. A few years ago, a group of aliens called Dark Elves tried to launch an attack. Natasha nodded. I've heard of it. They wanted to plunge the universe into darkness. Yes. Later, our research found that they are a kind of modified dark matter creature. They only interact with a very small amount of matter in the world that humans perceive. Like shadows, they exist in a different world from us. However, the energy in the material dimension they live in has weakened, and the entire dark world has begun to cool down. We measured the temperature of that dark dimension, and it has reached minus 150 degrees Celsius. That dimension can no longer provide the energy that life needs to survive. Natasha finally understood. No wonder they chose to invade our world. No. At that time, They were unable to invade our world. On the contrary, we helped them, because they were also a test subject of the apocalypse. They were dark matter creatures created by the apocalypse. The cold disaster of their universe was actually a disaster of the apocalypse. Out of sympathy, the 9 worlds at that time, including the ancient humans on Earth, worked together to use the reality gem to create a weapon that could interfere with the darkness of matter, ether. It transformed the dark elves and transformed the dark matter that made up their bodies into light, giving them the ability to interfere with our material dimension. Forming the dark elves, the mystical form of semi-dark matter life forms. Although we suspect that this might be another one of the heavens' apocalypse's experiments, its positive significance is still great. It is a symbol of the 9 nations' united efforts to resist the heavens' apocalypse. It was the most glorious era of the 9 great nations. Although this era passed in the blink of an eye, it was destroyed in an apocalypse, but still meaningful. After the Republic came to this universe, they found us survivors and restarted our civilization. At that time, the remnants of the Dark Elves tried to use ether to darken the photons of our universe, plundering energy from our physical dimension to restore their homeland, the Dark Dimension. But they were destroyed by the Republic. At the same time, in that war, we also seized that weapon, the ether particles. The Republic has always had rather advanced research on dark energy and dark matter. The ether particle is no secret to us, but the reality gem is a very valuable research material. This is because it can interfere with all matter. It can interact with any dark matter. Through this mystical material, the Republic finally began to delve into the dark matter of our universe, the dark dimension. This is the reality gem. Natasha looked at the mysterious crimson material she had brought. No, the researcher explained. The ether particles have no meaning to us. It might be a powerful weapon created by the 9 worlds to deal with the apocalypse. There are also similar weapons like the icebox, the eternal flame, the eye of Agamotto, the Tesseract. To those civilizations, they are of course important. They were their strongest weapons at their peak. But to the Republic, they are all outdated. A cannon might be a divine weapon in a primitive society, but in the interstellar era, it can only be placed in a museum. The ether particles are now stored in the history museums of the 9 worlds. After the reality gem thoroughly researched its unique properties and found the essential connection between all matter and energy, perfecting advanced energy and matter physics, its value in research is limited to this. You mean, the Republic has created a more advanced weapon? Natasha exclaimed. It's not a weapon, the researcher said proudly. It's a new field of physics, the dark energy of energetics and the dark dimension of space physics. This field is the study of chaos, which studies the fundamental relationship between all matter and energy. The application of a new subject to military technology is unimaginable. It is not a powerful weapon, nor is it a new type of weapon, but a whole new technological tree. The researcher turned to the armillary machine, and the crimson material spread out like a nebula, bound within the ring, and red and black lightning raged within it. That crimson material is a new element synthesized by the Republic. It is a catalyst and medium for changing the nature of matter and energy, darkening or photolifying them. It is called ether. Now, the Republic's new dimensional warships are equipped with a physical weapon that can change the nature of matter and energy, the ether spectrum, and a mathematical weapon that can interfere with the cosmological constant, the information modulation port. Of course, because the Holy Shield's authority level in the APC is too low, it cannot use the Republic's military weapons. But our researchers have modified a civilian version overnight. It is the armillary sphere in front of you. This name is used to commemorate the founder of the Divine Spear Bureau, Zhang Heng. The armillary sphere can use the ether material to change the nature of matter and energy within a certain range, and it is a weapon of laws. Because of the rush, the power of this armillary sphere can only cover the Earth and Moon system. Natasha smiled sweetly. I think this range is enough. I hope it can help you. The researcher pushed the glasses on the bridge of his nose and said with a smile, "After returning to the floating pyramid base of the Holy Shield Brotherhood, Natasha found a dispirited Thor. He was holding the broken remains of Mjolnir Moore, looking a little lost. When Natasha found him, she leaned over to Thor and said helplessly, 'Thor, that's just a hammer. It's not just a weapon. It's also the symbol of Thor.' I still remember the moment I picked it up in front of the people of Asgard, in front of my father. All of Asgard cheered. It recognized my power, and only Thor could pick it up. After I was blinded by pride, it rejected me. It witnessed my growth." Natasha frowned. There could not go on a mission with her in this state. She squatted down and said to Thor, "You keep calling him Mjolnir Moore. What does this name mean?" "Thor's hammer." Thor raised his head, a trace of pride still on his face. "So," Natasha asked, "because you picked up Thor's hammer, you became Thor?" "Yes," Thor said with a nostalgic look. "When I picked it up, my father, the king of gods, Odin, gave me the name of Thor. Then this hammer should be called. The one who picks up this hammer is the fated Thor of Asgard. I think the bards and dramatists of Asgard will give it a famous name, such as the Hammer of Blood and Thunder." Natasha shook her head. "Thor, this hammer became Mjolnir Moore because of you. Because you are Thor, it is Thor's hammer. You are Thor, not hammer. If the one who picks up this hammer is Thor, then the real Thor should be this hammer. If you think so, it's an insult to you, and even to your father, and to Odin's theocracy. You are Odinson, you are Thor, and the hammer you pick up is Thor's hammer." Chapter 1081. Thor got rid of some of the gloominess and lack of confidence after losing his hammer. He stood up and looked at the fragments of Mjolnir on the ground. Seeing this, Natasha put them away and said, "Give me these fragments. I'll get the Revolutionary Alliance to recast it for you. After all, you still lack a suitable weapon." "I can get the dwarves to recast a weapon for me," said Thor. Natasha smiled and said, "The craftsmanship of the Revolutionary Alliance isn't bad. You can't go back to Asgard yet. If Odin thinks you need a weapon, he will throw it in front of you. If he thinks you need to get rid of your dependence on weapons and rebuild your confidence, then you won't get it even if you go." Thor thought about it and realized that it was true. He knew how disappointed his father would be if he lost Mjolnir Moore. Thinking of this, he didn't dare to go back to see Odin. In an underground bar in Los Angeles, psychedelic lights flickered and intense rhythmic electronic music surged. In this underground bar, located in a hidden corner of the night market in Chinatown, there were drugs, liquor, and an extravagant atmosphere. There were urban men and women in revealing clothes, as well as an underground rock band with extraordinary skills. Underground bars used to be everywhere in the United States, but after the cataclysm in New York, government regulation became stricter. Young men and women who grew up in this decadent era had nowhere to vent their inner confusion. Underground bars that were more hidden, more secure, and more powerful became places for them to express their unbridled youth. The men and women on the dance floor screamed one after another. Several tattooed men in black clothes who were watching the crowd from a hidden corner were watching everyone vigilantly. The women on the dance floor were dancing wildly on drugs. The men and women who were in close contact with each other, and sometimes these people would even greedily glare at the naked bodies with beautiful figures, but they would at most take a few glances before moving their eyes away vigilantly and looking at other places. Such quality was comparable to the elite agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. A black man wearing a windbreaker and sunglasses attracted their attention. Whether it was his behavior or attire, his temperament was different from the chaotic atmosphere here. Several men in black bowed their heads and said a few words into their headphones. Immediately, someone pushed aside the revelers who were blocking the way and came to the black man. They put their hands on the man's chest and whispered, "Come with us." It was difficult to understand the voice in the loud music, but they didn't seem to care whether the man heard it or not. They grabbed him and brought him out. They shuttled through the narrow and hidden passageways and came to an office. They brought him in, but surprisingly, other than the boss who was sitting on the chair without saying anything, there were two other people in the office. One of them was wearing a suit, had long blonde hair, and looked like the male lead of the old movie Breaking Point. He was sitting on the desk in front of the boss, facing the boss. The other man was a red-haired woman with a hot and alluring figure, standing elegantly with her back to them. The four men in black who were escorting the black man into the room immediately went on alert. They reached into their chests to grab the guns in their holsters, but the red-haired woman simply smiled at them. Her body bounced up like a flexible rubber rod, and her hair left a trail of red afterimages in the air. A pair of astonishingly tactile thighs clamped around the neck of one of the men in black, and her other hand pressed against the head of another man in black. The men in black erupted with astonishing strength and speed, but it was useless in front of Natasha. Natasha broke the neck of one of the men, then used her bare hands to break the necks of the other two. Finally, with a flick of her leg, a long and slender leg stabbed into the heart of the last man in black. The black man who was brought in was sure that this kick to the heart had definitely shattered the poor fellow's heart into at least 6 pieces. Natasha straightened her back and stood up. The 4 men in black who had fallen to the ground were surprisingly still showing signs of life, and were even recovering. The 3 whose necks had been broken even showed signs of recovery when they turned their heads. Natasha took out a makeup box. She opened the makeup box, and the small makeup mirror inside emitted a bluish-purple high-power searchlight beam. The 4 men in black on the ground trembled violently in the light, their skin covered in dense blisters. They opened their mouths wide and wailed silently. Natasha calmly looked at her watch to calculate the time. 50 seconds later, these people turned into a pool of ashes. Another 10 seconds later, the boss, who had been pressed into a chair by Thor and had all his bones broken, also trembled and turned into flying ash. Natasha closed the makeup box and looked at her watch. 1 minute. He's already an expert among vampires, but he can only last 1 minute under extreme ultraviolet light. Thor said, "Just don't get skin cancer from the sun." Natasha smiled. "This is weapon-grade ultraviolet light, a weapon specially designed for them. The penetrative effect is very strong, and even if it shines on the human body for a long time, it's only equivalent to weak sunlight. The biggest side effect is probably tanning. In fact, it's specially modulated according to the spectrum. For humans, it's harmless and even beneficial for sunbathing, but for these dirty beasts, it's a deadly weapon." The black man found a chair and sat down. "It seems you came here specially to find me, and to do some experiments," Natasha said. Daywalker, Blade, a warrior who's hard to say whether he's human or vampire. When he was a fetus, he was infected by a vampire and mutated. You don't think of yourself as a vampire, but you don't seem to identify with humans either. Compared to those vampires, some humans aren't much better. Blade said, "I don't hunt vampires to protect humans. At first, it was just for revenge, but later it became a mission. I make money and live because I don't know anything else except hunting vampires. So, I'm just a bounty hunter, not a hero. We're here to ask you for a favor," Natasha said frankly. Blade lowered his head and took a cigarette. "I'm not a mercenary. I'm a bounty hunter. You pay the bounty, and if I bring its head, you pay. If I don't bring it, it means I'm not doing this business. There's no promise, only money and goods. We're not here to ask you to kill vampires," Natasha said. "We're here to ask you to do an assessment." Blade was slightly stunned. He said, "Assessment? No one has ever asked me to do that. I've already said, I only know how to hunt those monsters. You're the human who has had the most contact with the vampires. You understand them, hunt them, investigate them. You're the first to notice their every move and every conspiracy. Have there been any unusual movements from the vampires recently?" Natasha projected a bank account, one that Blade was very familiar with. $10,000 for one question. Blade smiled. "Frankly, I like the cleanliness of your SHIELD. By the way, didn't you defect to the Soviet Union? And this alien prince. Even the Avengers are doing this kind of work?" Thor tilted his head and observed quietly, not responding to Blade's words. As an Asgardian prince who considered himself a god, he looked down on these vampires, or rather, the pride of the Asgardians made him disdain to answer Blade's words. Blade took a puff of his cigarette and slowly exhaled. They've been doing something big recently. A few families are getting restless. I've found out that they've mobilized a lot of weapons and are wantonly developing their descendants. It's been a long time since they've developed their descendants on such a large scale. I'm here to investigate today. I don't need $10,000 for one question. Give me $1.5 million, and I'll tell you everything. Natasha's eyes moved as she looked at the projected account. Instantly, the number changed. Blade had no doubt and smiled. $2 million. That's generous. They're going to make a big news. Many new vampires have been transferred to Africa. Their funds, including the upper echelons they control, are putting pressure on SHIELD to support a new country called Wakanda. Those old guys think that after the New York incident, the pressure from humans is increasing and the living space of the vampires is being squeezed. The law enforcement agencies are becoming less afraid of hunting down the lower echelons who don't follow the rules. They want to show off their strength and restore the balance. In short, it's to intimidate the upper echelons of the human race and give them enough living space, including blood farms and human trafficking, right? Natasha asked. They become forgers, Blade said. Now, let's get down to business, Natasha replied. This question is worth $5 million, and we hope that you can give us a truthful and detailed answer from your point of view. First, we need you to provide a racial assessment of the vampires. Do they have humanity? What is their level of civilization? Their relationship with humans? Most importantly, are they willing to coexist peacefully with humans and accept the punishment of human law, including settling old scores? Is there a possibility for humans and vampires to coexist peacefully? Blade took a deep breath and slowly exhaled a ring of smoke. Every vampire is guilty of the most heinous crimes. They are a type of monster, not a race. They may look elegant, but their desire for blood has warped their humanity when they were alive, a group of inhumane beasts who feed on humans. They will not hesitate to bite open the neck of the most innocent child and suck them dry. They despise humans. The only reason they know their place is because they fear the power of humans, and not because they want peace. Yes, the vampires are divided into two factions, the demon faction and the secret faction. However, the only difference between them is that the secret faction wishes to enjoy a life of hunting and preying in secret, carrying out their evil deeds. The demon faction wishes to establish a terrifying order led by the vampires, to create a world where humans are bred. One of them chooses to live as a parasite among humans, and the other chooses to replace humans as the master. Can humans and vampires coexist? Of course, as long as you can watch innocent people being harmed and watch the hidden crimes of the vampires. They are willing to compromise and hide. But to make the vampires give up, hunt humans, and even pay the price for their crimes, that is impossible. In summary, after understanding the state of civilization and racial characteristics of the vampires, the Holy Shield has suggested to carry out genocide measures against them. They no longer have the conditions for civilized coexistence. Natasha returned to the floating pyramid base and began to write the relevant report for the Revolutionary Alliance. The report will be submitted to the Abnormal Biological Hazard and Control Committee for review. 2 days later, the review results were sent to the headquarters of the Holy Shield Brotherhood, and the headquarters forwarded it to the Eastern Base. Natasha once again came to the Circle Base and stood in front of the armillary sphere. The researcher glanced at the report, which read, "The committee's opinion is that vampires do not exist in civilization, nor are they a hostile race, but a biological disaster mechanism in human society. They should be artificially corrected and interfered with. Genocide plan approved." The armillary sphere slowly turned, and the researcher said, "This time, we will interfere with the physical characteristics of ultraviolet light. Ether will darken part of the ultraviolet spectrum of sunlight shot toward the Earth. Ultraviolet light will be able to penetrate buildings, rocks, magma, and most material elements without loss. Only carbon will be interfered with by ultraviolet light. That is to say, the part of ultraviolet light in sunlight will be like neutron radiation, passing through inorganic materials such as facilities and buildings, and only causing damage to organic matter. But the modulated ultraviolet light is not lethal to humans and plants, or in other words, is a quasi-weapon against vampires. For other carbon-based creatures on Earth, this is only equivalent to 2 days of extra sunlight. There will be no harm. Maybe their skin will turn a little darker, but for vampires, it is like 2 days of soaking in strong acid. Will the Revolutionary Alliance darken ultraviolet radiation on Earth for 2 days? Natasha asked. Yes, the researcher replied. Within 2 days, every corner of the Earth will be exposed to ultraviolet radiation, even in buildings and buried underground. We will do a comprehensive ultraviolet sterilization of the Earth. Will it affect the microbial population? Natasha asked cautiously. We have evaluated the microbial population is very adaptable. Although the absolute number of some bacteria will be reduced, it will only be a small impact. After 7 days, it will return to normal. Since there is no negative impact, Natasha said, then let's begin. Today, the vampire population around the world was peacefully spending another day. As a long-lived species, they were comfortable, superior, and did not care about this little bit of time. Until the Revolutionary Alliance adjusted the light on Earth, they turned on the ultraviolet sterilization light on Earth. Stave, the actual controller of the Stave Consortium in the United States, was an old, white, bald, and fat man who was in charge of the upper class. He looked like a man in his 50s, but his Social Security records showed that he was in his 70s. However, his real age was already 365 years old. As a high-level vampire, he could wake up in the morning and bask in the sun in a special glass shed that could filter ultraviolet and harmful rays. Then, he would pick up a glass of the blood of a 1982 beauty, which tasted like mellow red wine. For breakfast, Stave only tasted virgins born in 1982. This was because in that year, the astronomical phenomenon of the 9 stars alignment had occurred. The 9 planets of the solar system had vaguely connected into a line, causing the moon's magic tide. Girls born in that year had the best blood quality. Unfortunately, they were almost 40 years old now, and their quality had long begun to decline. It had been 15 years since their best taste period had passed. Only a nostalgic vampire like Stave would be so obsessed with this year. This was also a way for him to show off his status. A 1982 virgin, she had maintained her chastity for 40 years. Among the vampires, only the most powerful existences had such financial and material resources. The lowly vampires are used to drinking the poison blood of promiscuous streetwalkers. Only a successful vampire like Stave deserved to drink the blood of 1,982 virgins every day. He quietly admired the beautiful arterial blood color of the cultivated virgins, gently swirling the glass. The blood in the glass hung on the wall of the glass and slowly flowed down, showing off the excellent quality. Chapter 1082. As the sun gradually rose and the warm morning light became hotter, Staff's breakfast time was coming to an end. Usually, at this time, he would stand on the rooftop and look down at the ostentatious and extravagant morning in Los Santos for a while before turning around to deal with the financial group's business for the day. Even a vampire would be very busy after succeeding. Staff was as busy as a president every day, and he indeed had the power of a president. This was the situation of the United States of America. A mere president was nothing. Back when the ace president was still a real estate tycoon, Chairman Staff did not give him any face at all. How dare a small new capitalist compare to the Staff family's 300 years of accumulation? Just like how Jews would band together in economic activities, so would vampires, and they had a much stronger advantage than Jews. Before World War II, Jews were exploited by governments and capitalists, but vampires had already infiltrated the upper class of humans 5,000 years ago. At that time, various noble families in Europe were deeply infiltrated by vampires, to the point that humans had to rely on various religious activities of the church to maintain their social purity. As everyone knew, vampires were not allowed to participate in Catholic religious activities. This could be traced back to the Egyptian pharaoh who was bewitched by a certain high priest and cursed by the Messiah, as well as a certain angel of the plague, Legion, who fell under the tricks of humans and was dismembered by the angels. There were also vampires created by the ancient evil gods and the unique mutation of the primitive virus of the Ebola tribe. In a sense, they were all targets of the Messiah. The evil gods were the enemies of the Messiah. They were created by the Creator and were the complete opposite of the Messiah. The angel of plague was a traitor of the Messiah and was ordered to be dismembered. The hatred between a certain Egyptian high priest and the apocalypse was as deep as the sea, and he swore to resist the fate imposed on him by the apocalypse. Although the primitive virus of the Ebola tribe was a part of the plague knights, when the angel of the plague Legion betrayed them, he stole some of the power of the primitive virus and induced the vampire virus. The four origins of vampires in this world, the evil gods, the Egyptian curse, the angel virus, and the decaying parasites, were all hated by the Messiah. Therefore, it might not be groundless to say that vampires were hated by God. After all, God had once modified many types of vampires, and Adam had personally created the radiation blood clan, which used radiation as a source of power. But the fact that Christ, the Son of God, detested vampires was not entirely baseless gossip. After Rome, the Western world became a Catholic Christian civilization. Perhaps it had something to do with the threat of vampires. In the Roman Republic era, many chief citizens were related to vampires. In the Roman Empire era, many Roman emperors chose the embrace for the sake of immortality. At the very least, Nero had a close relationship with vampires. Although Nero himself was a demon contractor, among his Roman officials and nobles, there were so many vampires that they could hold a blood clan conference in the palace. As an existence with such deep roots in the Western world, after the Industrial Revolution, they were the first to devote themselves to business and finance, reaping a large amount of the benefits of the Industrial Revolution. During the subsequent world wars, they were international capital without borders, coexisting with each other. After the war, the international capital shifted to the United States and deeply influenced and controlled the country. Needless to say, the political and economic power of vampires was like a parasite growing in the capital world, deeply rooted from the brain to the limbs. Many people refer to bankers as vampires. Most of the time, this was the literal meaning. S.H.I.E.L.D. could deal with the aliens who invaded the Earth, the rulers of different time and space, the supervillains who were lucky enough to obtain power, and even the powerful Hydra that had been lurking since ancient Egypt, but could not deal with the vampires who fed on humans. Because, in a sense, the vampires were the country, or at least the country's economy. Capital vampires like Stave, who controlled powerful financial groups, were not a minority in this country. They were the huge shadow of the iceberg under the sea. So Stave could see the power of humans. He saw how the Avengers fought against the Thanos, who were thousands of times more powerful than their race. But he was not worried that they would attack him. Sometimes, people could fight against opponents who were much stronger than them, but they could not do anything to the little parasites in their brains. When Staff was looking down at Los Santos, he felt his skin itch from the sunlight that had filtered out the radiation harmful to vampires. It was like the feeling of a slightly acidic liquid corroding a person's skin. It was a weak but persistent itch. Staff's expression instantly turned gloomy. In order to let himself bask in the sun every day, he had invested nearly $1 billion in research on how to remove harmful radiation from the sun. He had created this special glass that could filter ultraviolet rays and built this glass greenhouse. But now, this glass greenhouse that was worth $1 billion had a problem. Stave was furious. He was ready to call the person in charge to come up and scold him. He wanted to lock the low-level vampire in this glass greenhouse for a day and let it have a taste of the power of the sun at noon. The glass greenhouse could only protect vampires on cloudy days or in the morning when the sun was not so strong. At noon, even with the protection of a special glass, it was still harmful. It was equivalent to a human being soaked in a weak acidic solution for an entire day, But just as these thoughts flashed through Stave's mind, the vampire's excellent motion capture ability allowed him to see the white smoke coming from the skin on his hand. Then, although there were age spots, his well-maintained skin began to rapidly fester and burn as if it was stuck to a red iron plate. Stave could not help but scream in pain from a sudden burst of pain. Another unruly person wants to harm me. This was the only thought in Stave's mind. Then, he quickly bounced up, his fat body turning into a black shadow with indescribable agility and leaping into the room. Stave looked old and fat, but that was just a disguise. In fact, his physical strength was far superior to that of a human's. He still thought that someone had done something to the glass to harm him. Once he returned to the shadows, he would be safe. In reality, he still maintained his vigilance. No one would think that such a small trick could defeat a high-level blood race, so the opponent must have some tricks up their sleeves. But when he stepped into the room, he did not see any tricks from his opponent. Instead, he saw his subordinates, descendants, low-level blood race, and blood thralls all screaming. All of Stave's bodyguard team and personal affairs team were in a mess. Stave could still feel the pain of being scorched by the sun. His face had already festered into a puddle of rotten flesh. The corpses of some low-level blood race members lay in a puddle on the ground, as if they had been corroded by strong acid. Their flesh and blood had turned to mush and were still bubbling and smoking. This was not an enemy plot, but a genocide by the IPR. No, no. Stave bit down on the neck of his beautiful female secretary, greedily sucking the blood of this cutie who had graduated from a famous Ivy League university. Through sucking the blood, the festering on his body got better, but his condition did not improve at all. The damage caused by the sun was still happening. Healing the wounds by sucking blood only brought more pain. In order to survive, Stave and his trusted vampires slaughtered the humans under his command in a frenzy. But as time passed, the number of humans that could sustain his life became fewer and fewer. He could only pick up a fat, fair-skinned middle-aged man that he had originally disdained. This man was his personal accountant. Stave bit down on the man's carotid artery and controlled the speed at which he sucked blood. He turned into a black shadow and dashed downstairs. There were many employees who served him downstairs, but they were no longer his trusted subordinates. The humans there did not know his true identity. If he was exposed in front of them, even Stave would be in big trouble. But now that he had to survive, he could not care less about this. Most of the vampires under him had turned into a pool of mud, and some had even turned into ashes. Time was of the essence. A middle-level vampire could not bear the pain of being scorched by the sun and jumped down from the top of a 56-story building. At this height, even a vampire would be smashed into a pool of mud. If it was at night, he could have waited for his body to heal, then attacked a few passers-by and wiped his mouth dry. But now he did not have this chance. With all the bones in his body broken, he could only lie on the ground, letting the sun evaporate his flesh and blood. The crowd around him was screaming, and everyone was watching in horror. Fresh flesh and blood ran around him, but he could only watch as his body continued to melt and evaporate. Finally, amidst the horror of the passers-by, he melted and evaporated, leaving only black ashes where he stood. Stave, who had jumped down to the staff office on the lower level, had already melted into a bloody pulp. His flesh and blood were mixed together, hanging on his skeleton like wet mud. When he jumped out, his appearance was second to none in terms of horror and disgust. The weak employees screamed and desperately tried to get away from him. But Stave could no longer move. He stretched out his hand and grabbed at the fresh bags of blood. It was only a few meters, but it was like a heavenly moat, unreachable. His legs had already melted, and his whole body was paralyzed on the ground. He stubbornly reached out towards the person who gave off the smell of fresh blood that he desired. Finally, Stave's body emitted sparks, and he turned into ashes in front of everyone. The terrified employees took out their phones with trembling hands and recorded this short video. A few minutes later, it would appear on YouTube and Facebook, accompanied by the self-righteous comments of those insignificant and ignorant humans. The arrogant Stave, the noble high-ranking blood clan, had become his food and after-dinner entertainment. Chapter 1083. At the same time, the vampires who were ready to come out to hunt in the dusk of Southeast Asia were in a much more miserable state than their kind in Europe and North America. Their originally leisurely days were interrupted by the arrival of the behemoth China, which was the People's Revolutionary Alliance. In the Southeast Asian region under the protection of the Republic, countless energetic social organizations and these monsters who had mingled with humans were destroyed. Now, they could only live in the gray world of Bangkok, relying on the blood of drug addicts, gambling addicts, and drunkards to sustain their lives. Now, the poor people in Bangkok looked around their low shacks in horror. Those who were clearly not to be trifled with were wailing and rolling on the ground, leaving pieces of flesh and blood on the ground. Then, the flesh and blood were quickly dehydrated, and the flesh and blood were reduced to carbon. After these people were done burning, the poor people who were secretly watching them would pry open the doors of their houses and sweep away all the things inside. Those who were a little careless simply swept away the ashes on the ground and moved their bedding inside. The European community retained some of the institutions of the original government. They've borrowed from structure known as the Political Consultative Conference in the Republic and put all these monsters in it. Therefore, in the House of Lords that remained in the United Kingdom, a few of the lords who participated in the regular session of the House of Lords performed a traditional play of barbecuing a living person in front of everyone. It was a pity that this traditional performance was not traditional enough without the church hosting it. After the ashes of the vampires were disco dancing, the relevant personnel of the European community came forward to sweep the ashes. The group of people pretended that nothing had happened and continued the meeting. The industrial area of Detroit was made up of a large number of abandoned factories and residential areas. The place was desolate and run down. Dalphone walked through the abandoned houses. Beside him, a group of black and white youths gathered together, looking dispirited. They curled up at the ends of the streets, and some of them were even discreetly looking at Dalphone. Blade's black face gave him a lot of convenience. Many people looked away when they saw his face. Another black man who had nothing to do. There was no shortage of black gangsters here. Blades felt his way to the stronghold of a black vampire he knew. Yes, there were black vampires too, and they generally lived a miserable life. Who said that there was no racial discrimination among vampires? They were both vampires, and they could mingle in the upper class just by having a white skin. At the very least, they could live among the decadent youths in the big cities. Yes, the kind of low-level vampires who drank the poisonous blood of drug addicts on the streets, as staff had said. However, black vampires were also discriminated against among vampires. Their status was even lower than some white-skinned blood thralls and slurps. They could only live in a rundown place like Detroit and occasionally attack a few black and white hooligans. The quality of their blood was much better. Although they also took drugs, at least they had a strong physique. But he had no money and belonged to the countryside among vampires. Because of his skin color, Blade had quite a bit of prestige among them. After all, he was a well-known figure. He was also a vampire, and a rare breed among vampires, a daywalker. If word of this got out, it would help the black vampires gain face. Therefore, Blade would occasionally get some information from these people, and he would be merciful enough to spare their lives. After all, the police would occasionally keep a few informants. But this time, when he found the gathering place of his informants, Blade knocked on the door several times, but there was no response. He felt that something was wrong and kicked the door open. Inside was a low living room. There were some messy hookah pipes, tin foil, pistols, and small bills on the table. There was only a layer of black ashes on the large sofa, and a black girl lying naked in the bedroom. Blade recognized these ashes. In fact, he often made such things. His face was gloomy. Although the house was a bit messy and there were signs of a struggle, Blade did not see any damage from a fight. He tried to imagine what had happened here. A group of black vampires taking drugs, and then someone knocked on the door, and he came in and suddenly turned on the ultraviolet light in front of the vampires. No, there was something wrong. Dalphone sensed the logical flaw in his assumption. He had to find out who had done all this. Although he did not care about the life and death of a few vampires, he had seen through it long ago. He was not a human, nor a vampire, not even a black person. He was alone. Blade made the call. Whistler, I've discovered something wrong. Wumuhu looked at the ashes left behind by the vampire elders who claimed to have the secret of the primitive Ebola virus and wanted to cooperate with him to obtain the power of the primitive virus. He was a little stunned. Something was wrong with this development. He could tell at a glance that all the vampires he had come into contact with in Wakanda were dead. He had just gone to check on the spies that the vampires had used to infiltrate this place. All of them had been turned into ashes. The witnesses he had sent to monitor the situation claimed that the vampire elders were screaming in pain as they melted and evaporated. Wumuhu was thinking about his scheme. Now that things had come to this, he would not regret not protecting their potential allies on Earth. Instead, he was calculating what he could use to his advantage. Now, there are videos everywhere on Twitter. Citizens have filmed at least 60 people breaking out of their houses or spontaneously combusting in public. The president even saw an aide turn into ashes in the White House. In a congressional office, 2 senators and their men were screaming and melting. At a defense conference, even 2 generals were attacked. Now the Department of Defense has claimed that they were attacked by chemical weapons. The Congress and the White House want us to give them an explanation. Nick Fury was furious. Why do we have to give the vampires an explanation? The vampires have infiltrated the Department of Defense. They should give me an explanation. Where did this attack on the vampires come from? Nick Fury asked. The director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Coulson, who had no sense of presence, was opposite him. Nick One-Eyed was now the representative of the World Security Council to S.H.I.L.D., and the former director, Alexander Pierce, held this position before his identity as an undercover agent of Hydra was exposed. Coulson said, "The Brotherhood of the Holy Shield just sent us a document indicating that this matter is related to them. In the circle base of the former Holy Spear Bureau, they changed the physical properties of ultraviolet rays around the world so that they can penetrate conventional obstacles without attenuation. Our laboratory has just tested and found that the ultraviolet rays in the sun have undergone a qualitative change called darkening. They have become a kind of dark energy. Only when they encounter organic organisms will they come into contact with them because of the principles we currently do not understand. So, no matter where you are now, you will be exposed to ultraviolet radiation. The Revolutionary Alliance has turned on ultraviolet light on the Earth." Nick Fury said, "They are exterminating vampires. Maybe there will be individuals who survive for special reasons, but vampires as a population are extinct. They came to ask us about our attitude towards vampires the other day and asked us to send back an investigation document. The government will also ask the people's attitude before making laws, before raising prices and collecting taxes. So are they our government? Who gave them the right to commit genocide in the United States? Don't forget that even if they are vampires, they are also U.S. citizens. The Revolutionary Alliance has no right to kill them. If they want to do it, it should be us, S.H.I.E.L.D. ourselves." Nick roared, "They are violating our rights, violating the sovereignty of the United States." But Coulson hesitated. They're doing it in the name of the Holy Shield Brotherhood. The Holy Shield Brotherhood is nominally established by the East and the West and is an organization registered with the World Security Council. Although the Revolutionary Alliance controls it, we are also nominally a part of it. It is difficult for us to protest against the actions of the Revolutionary Alliance, just like the United States under the banner of the United Nations. Nick sneered. He was silent after saying that, then said, "I was wrong. We must admit that the actions of the Holy Shield Brotherhood are supported by us. Now that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s influence in the United States and the World Security Council is very low, we must take this opportunity to re-emphasize our influence. This matter cannot be done by the Revolutionary Alliance alone, but we must work together. I neglected the power and influence of the Holy Shield Brotherhood. It may have existed in name in the past, but when the Revolutionary Alliance truly supports it and puts on its skin, the Holy Shield Brotherhood has truly amazing power and influence. Exterminating the vampires will not only not be condemned, but will also announce its official resurrection. We can no longer deal with the Holy Shield Brotherhood coldly. If we don't want to be marginalized in the fight against alien invasion and protect Earth, and SHLD will completely lose its influence, we must compete with the Revolutionary Alliance for control and power over the Holy Shield Brotherhood. We must reverse our strategy against the Holy Shield Brotherhood, report to the World Security Council and the Department of Defense that this incident is the result of the joint cooperation between SHLD and the former Holy Spear Bureau under the framework of the Holy Shield Brotherhood. Fully support the Holy Shield Brotherhood and infiltrate it. Only when the spear and the shield are together can it be the Holy Shield. We can no longer let the captain control the power of the Holy Shield that belongs to the West. He is too politically naive. The Holy Shield used the actions of the alien Ebony Maw on Earth to intensify the conflict between various organizations and the local forces on Earth, dividing the world into two clear sides. One is their allies, and the other is their enemy. Then, they unite their allies and eradicate the enemy. Now they are exterminating the vampires on the grounds that they are involved in the alien conspiracy. This is the manifestation of this strategy. I have to say that this is a correct and effective strategy. Sometimes you not only need to destroy your enemies, but you also need them to be exposed, especially when you have the advantage. At this time, most of the political silence is not acquiescence, but a potential crisis. Since it is so useful, we should also use this strategy. The vampires are just the beginning. What we really need to do is, Chinong said at the Holy Shield Brotherhood's collective meeting, "Those who obey me will prosper, and those who oppose me will die. All the hidden clowns and bugs on Earth must be eliminated." In his mansion, Anthony Stark was looking at the financial report, which was full of huge expenses, and a messy financial data, which ensured that the Federal Tax Bureau wouldn't be able to figure out what was going on. Tony used his super high IQ to sort out the intricacies of the situation. Friday said, "Sir, those companies are already under our control." In the capital carnival of the destruction of the vampires, Tony, with his superb insight and wisdom, as well as the political influence and strength of the Stark Group, took the biggest piece. The key was that the other consortiums did not know that it was him who did it. They knew that Stark had taken some laboratories and patents, but they did not know how much Tony had taken. That was 20 times the capital of the Stark Group. Although the Stark Group did not rely on absolute capital to operate, but based on technology and patents, industrial technology and productivity, so its scale was far smaller than the financial group. But now the biggest mountain of the financial group belonged to Stark. When I was young, I once thought of a very interesting theory. Tawny held the red wine and said, "Capital always flows to higher places and tends to be concentrated. That is to say, capital always concentrates in more capital. Money will invest in more money, and eventually they will gather together, and the gap between the rich and the poor will be completely widened. A rich man will occupy all the capital in society. That may be the end of capitalism. That is the end of the capitalist class." I thought this was a crazy fantasy. Now it seems that it is not unreasonable. Humans need a person to operate these capital rationally, and they need someone to arrange everything for them. That person should be me. Tawny's face was hidden in the shadows. He picked up the glass and took a sip. Chapter 1084. Andromeda Galaxy. Skrulls. Green-skinned Skrulls that had evolved from reptiles came out of their dwellings in groups, staring at the sky. Over the sky, a huge steel construct streaked across the sky, its shadow covering the land. In the outer space of the Skrulls' homeworld, a Kirov-class interstellar cruiser with a 5-pointed star emblem hung on its bow slowly sailed past. Further away, the wreckage of countless Skrulls' starships floated in the dark, cold space. The entire Andromeda 31 galaxy had been reduced to a huge battlefield, with the wreckage of metal warships showing signs of being torn, twisted, and melted. In a vast vacuum of space, The battlefield was both small and vast, and compared to the M31 galaxy, the wreckage was as insignificant as a grain of sand in the vast ocean. But from a human's perspective, the wreckage was no smaller than the surrounding planets, orbiting a star as large as a planet. One could imagine that after millions of years, the microorganisms and bacteria that mimic the ecosystem in the wreckage would flourish on the Skrulls' corpses, and the intelligent life they would evolve into would develop a new civilization in the wreckage's homeworld. The Skrull Emperor looked at the fleet in outer space with a complicated expression, his expression struggling for a moment before he ordered the activation of the palace's remaining defensive measures. After the Scap's fleet had torn through most of the defenses of the Skrulls' homeworld, his palace's main defensive system as the Skrull Emperor no longer held any meaning. The green-skinned Skrull Emperor's skin squirmed as he turned into a bearman with a high nose and deep eyes. The Skrulls evolved from reptiles, and in the process of evolution, like the chameleons on Earth, the Skrulls had also developed advanced shape-shifting abilities. Each of them could be said to be a natural spy, and in the history of the Skrull civilization's rise, they would often imitate the appearance of aliens from other planets and infiltrate their civilization to steal technology or destroy it, gradually growing into one of the three great alien empires of the galaxy. The Skrulls had a unique imitation civilization, and their technological system was built upon a series of aggressive behaviors, such as imitation, invasion, and digestion. The Skrull Emperor sent out a clear code communication signal, which was received by General Zhukov on the flagship of the Soviet fleet. The video of the Skrull Emperor was projected to the flagship's command center. The Supreme Skrull Emperor was kneeling on the ground, offering his crown to the Soviet soldiers surrounding the planet Skrulls. Conquerors from afar, I surrender to you on behalf of the Skrulls. I beg you not to destroy our home planet and preserve our civilization. We are willing to pay any price for this, as punishment for starting this war. The Skrulls are willing to serve you and submit to the rule of the Revolutionary Alliance. Zhu Kefu waited for the civilization ruling committee's decision. As a soldier, he could give suggestions on whether to keep a hostile civilization or not, but he could not make a decision. The civilization ruling committee was jointly established by the three allied nations of the Revolutionary Alliance. Based on the grand unification of information technology, the information manipulation technology, and parallel world observation technology derived from it, the collective consciousness of the Soviet iron will, the Republic's ultimate humanity, the will of China, the European Community's Voyage Committee, and other organizations to judge and deal with the enemy civilization. They would record all information of the civilization, examine the collective subconsciousness of the hostile civilization, and after reaching two magnitudes, observe all possibilities of the civilization, and finally make a comprehensive decision. Generally speaking, it was rare to choose to completely destroy a civilization in times of peace. Unfortunately, it was a special period when the Revolutionary Alliance was facing the greatest danger and the cruelest war. Zhu Kefu waited for the civilization ruling committee's reply. Zhu Kefu raised his hand and ordered his fleet to fire the Star Destroyer cannons. As a soldier, he could not oppose the civilization ruling committee's decision, and this was the only way to express his mourning for the death of a powerful civilization. No! The Skrull Emperor wailed in despair as he saw the Soviet fleet readjusting their battle lines. I beg you, don't destroy us. The Skrull Emperor's expression was one of despair and helplessness. In his final moments, he remembered the civilizations destroyed and slaughtered by the Skrulls, and there was no doubt that the past glory of the Skrulls was one of the main reasons the civilization ruling committee made such a judgment. The Skrulls on Skrulls were already aware of the outcome through the Advanced Information Network. They all hugged each other and looked at the sky in despair. Starting from the Skrull Emperor, everyone had assumed the appearance of Earthlings, making Skrulls look like a human planet. They were desperately begging for the destroyer's sympathy, as well as resisting the destruction. Look, you destroyed us today, and you will be destroyed tomorrow. White radiance of energy began to appear at the cannons of the Soviet fleet. The Prime Minister of the Skrulls, an old Skrull, stumbled to the Emperor and said regretfully, We should not have listened to Thanos' bewitchment and provoked a behemoth we could not afford to. He lied to us so that we could avoid the Devourer from targeting our homeworld. But he did not tell us that the reason the Devourer would forgive us was because we took the initiative to get involved in the vortex of these two behemoths. Now, the scrolls are about to be destroyed. I hate it. The Skrull Emperor wailed. Why? 30 years ago, when the planet Devourer was about to destroy Shroth, we chose Earth as the target of immigration. At that time, the people of Earth were still so weak, and they could only rely on the strength of a woman to temporarily defeat us. In just a short period of time, the Earth that appeared in front of us again has such a powerful civilization. I hate Thanos for lying to us, hate the Devourer for wanting to devour our planet and leave us with nowhere to go. But what I hate the most is the Earthlings. They destroyed everything we had, even if we had humbly begged them for mercy. I had also mercilessly destroyed those planets that begged us for mercy, using their homeworlds to delay the Devourer. But even if we were once guilty, it should not end like this. Convey my last order, Prime Minister. The Skrull Emperor calmed down and stood in front of the cannons of the Soviet fleet and ordered, "Convey this to those who are still lurking on Earth. The Skrulls have been destroyed. For the Skrulls, take revenge on Earth. They are the last avengers of our civilization. We will drag you into hell with us." The Soviet fleet's cannons fired in unison, and in the white torrent of destruction, it was like a magnificent scene of a white hole exploding. Countless colors of light mixed with the energy torrent of annihilation rushed towards Skrulls, and in the colors of destruction, everything was obliterated into nothingness, leaving only a distorted space, and the damage would slowly be eliminated over the countless years to come. In Hawkeye's home, his wife heard a knock on the door and opened it in surprise, only to see a red-haired girl smiling at her outside the door. She knew this woman. Hawkeye had once brought his comrades to her house to let them rest temporarily. At that time, the fusion of Sardras and Ultron almost destroyed the world. Everyone suffered setbacks in the hands of Adam, and their morale was low. For this reason, Hawkeye brought them back to his small home and told them why they fought. Natasha smiled and took out a small gift and said, "I just returned to this country, and I came to visit you." Hawkeye's wife warmly welcomed them and said, "Come in." Nick Fury pushed open the door, and what appeared in front of him was the eyes of Hawkeye's wife. The remaining brilliance in the glass body and the look of disbelief on her face made Nick Fury's heart tighten. "Who did it?" Nick said angrily, "Who did it?" Coulson came to him with a heavy face and whispered, "The security equipment in the house has been cleaned, and the technique is very professional. But our big data system calculates that the man appeared in the satellite of HRU before he entered the safe house of Hawkeye. Hawkeye's home is confidential, and the two agents who protected them were killed before they could send the signal. Not many people know about this place, and there are only 3 people in SHIELD. However, the Avengers have been here, and Natasha later rebelled. No one knows if she reported the situation here to the PELD. Now that Hawkeye and the PELD are in the Holy Shield Brotherhood, they will not act like this for no reason and split the Holy Shield. We have told them about the misfortune that happened here. The PELD will give us a reply." Nick Fury suddenly raised his hand and touched his blind eye, whispering, "The last time I trusted someone, I lost this eye. What happened here is so strange that it reminds me of what happened before. We need Captain Marvel to investigate this matter. Perhaps we will face a test of trust. The danger is no longer before the truth is found out, but after the truth is found out." The remaining eye of Nick Fury burst with suspicion. At this moment, he no longer trusted anyone, including Coulson behind him. T'Challa and Hawkeye returned to Wakanda. Their target was a man in a scaled leather suit, Namor, the Sea King from Atlantis. Chapter 1085. Hawkeye and T'Challa stood on the shore, looking at the shoreline in front of them. Just as they reached the shore, the calm sea that had been lapping against the shore in a cycle began to stir. The waves were getting higher and higher, the sea breeze gradually becoming stronger, and the muddy tide quickly overflowed the original shoreline. The tide rose rapidly, passing dozens of meters and arriving at Hawkeye and Turkera's feet. They were standing on a cliff by the sea, about 4 or 5 meters from the shoreline, but now the waves were beating against the cliff, and the water droplets were already splashing on their faces, the salty seawater assaulting their nostrils. In the midst of the raging waves, a huge spray suddenly rose from the sea like a pillar of water rising into the sky. Countless white waves that undulated like galloping horses gathered together, and a man's head emerged from a spray. The seawater slid down his short black hair and flowed over his chiseled face. His body gradually rose in the huge waves, and the trident in his right hand flashed with cold light, its entire body made of mixed gold. The man stepping on the huge wave was naked from the waist up, his muscles bulging. He only wore a pair of scaled leather shorts, and the foam from the spray slowly slid down his calves. He floated on the water with his arms crossed, and the huge wave under his feet surrounded him like a throne. The huge wave lifted him even higher than Hawkeye and the others, so that the sea prince could look down at them with a sarcastic and disdainful smile. "I am the Prince of Atlantis, the future master of the 7 seas, Namor," the sea prince said arrogantly. "You bunch of stupid monkeys. Did you come here to beg for mercy?" "Prince?" Turkera whispered into Hawkeye's ear. "Looks like this heir hasn't taken the throne yet. When I was a prince, I was much more well-behaved than him." "According to intelligence," Hawkeye replied quietly, "this Prince Namor is a mixed blood of Atlantean and human. You know how much the Atlanteans discriminate against humans. He is probably the most unpopular prince of Atlantis, so he has to show the most hostile attitude towards humans. Other princes can be arrogant and ignore them, but he has to show his disdain and hostility towards his own human bloodline. This I know, those who are discriminated against and oppressed are often the vanguard of discrimination and oppression. The second Japanese are usually more brutal than the Japanese," T'Challa said. "This guy is very mindful of his bloodline, so he'll talk to you with his nose in the air. I think my identity should be able to make him behave. After all, I'm still a king." So T'Challa took a step forward and said, "Prince of Atlantis, I, the king of Wakanda, the new Black Panther, the protector of vibranium. I came here to find you, to question, why did you ally with the people who invaded my country? A stray dog that was chased out?" Namor said disdainfully. "The king of the monkeys dares to question the true king." Turkera was infuriated by his contemptuous tone. He could hear that this Atlantean prince was blatantly expressing his discrimination against humans and other civilizations, even hostile attitude. How could T'Challa accept such an attitude? Not to mention him, even Hawkeye was so angry that he wanted to laugh. Hawkeye said, "I don't think we can communicate with him, and he won't communicate with us. Therefore, we still have to use the universal method. We always use this method with the aliens before we can communicate." "What method?" Turkera asked curiously. "Hawkeye, beat him up." What the two did not expect was that Namor would make the first move. He rode the huge wave and pounced forward, hundreds of tons of seawater crashing toward the two. Namor was wrapped in the huge wave, his trident driving the seawater to create a huge kinetic energy. At the same time, he could attack flexibly in the water. Faced with the impact of such a large amount of seawater, most people would be at a loss. At this time, Namor could use the trident to take his life by surprise. But the Black Panther's body shook, and he put on his battle suit. Hawkeye drew his bow and shot an arrow, aiming at Namor, who was shuttling between the gaps of the seawater. The huge kinetic energy hit the Black Panther, filling his battle suit with energy. The Black Panther was also very agile in the water. His legs seemed to be rooted to the ground, and he faced the impact of the huge wave calmly. His sharp claws accurately grabbed Namor's trident. Hawkeye's arrow pierced through the waves. The arrows that were specially prepared for this mission were streamlined, and they swam as nimbly as a silver fish in the water. They swam toward Namor. Atlantean technology was very advanced, but Namo did not like to carry high-tech items on him. Therefore, even if Namo discovered these arrows, he could only use his trident to manipulate the seawater to form a whirlpool to restrain them. The Black Panther grabbed the golden trident, and its claws left deep marks on the trident. This caused a flash of pain in Namo's eyes. The seawater around him pushed him, forming a powerful force that pressed down on Turkara. But Turkara's battlesuit had already accumulated hundreds of tons of seawater pressure. He suddenly exploded with this kinetic energy, and the huge force lifted Namo up. The arrows took the opportunity to approach. Hawkeye used the anti-gravity equipment to float in the air, constantly shooting these arrows. Although most of them were washed away by the current, he kept adding arrows to Namo's side. There would always be an opportunity. An arrow that looked like a silver fish, driven by the magnetized seawater that was constantly ejected from its tail, moved at an astonishing speed underwater. It rushed to Namo's side, and only slowed down when it encountered the high-density seawater around Namo's body. Namo caught it in his hand, but the arrow flickered twice and immediately exploded. These arrows were actually miniature torpedoes that looked like arrows. Namo cried out in pain. He clutched his arm, and red blood seeped out of his palm, spreading in the water. Hawkeye murmured at a low altitude, "I thought there was something different about the Atlanteans. Turns out that blood is red too. How dare you hurt the Prince of Atlantis?" Namo clutched his arm and said crazily, "You've committed an unforgivable crime. What are you trying to do?" Black Panther punched him in the face. The vibrating gold battle suit continued to vibrate, and the high-frequency vibration cut through the seawater around him, making his movements as agile as on land. Moreover, it could easily break through the high-density seawater that protected Namo's body. The vibrating gold could also provide Black Panther with underwater oxygen supply. The battle suit in the Holy Shield had been modified by the Human Revolutionary Alliance, adding an underwater function. Unfortunately, Namo was the first experimenter. The Human Revolutionary Alliance was trustworthy. In the underwater battle between Black Panther and Namo, generally speaking, Namo always had the upper hand based on his rich experience and his bloodline to adapt to the underwater environment. But this time his experience did not work. The newly added underwater sensing of the vibrating gold battle suit was like the two lines on the side of a fish's body, sensitive to the vibrations in the water. With the sensory organs of a fish, Black Panther could sense everything underwater by the fluctuations of the water. This was more reliable than his eyes. Namo, who did not have the battle suit to increase his strength, and the trident in his hand that controlled seawater was not useful in close combat, had already suffered a few punches. If Black Panther did not care about his identity and did not use the vibrating gold claw, he might have been seriously injured. But even so, Namo's situation was still very bad. He felt that he had lost face, so his attacks became more and more frenzied. This was a little troublesome for Takara. He could not really kill him. Namo did not represent just himself. For Wakanda, he did not want to offend the Atlanteans. Just when Black Panther was a little hesitant and ready to capture Namo, a few Atlantean warriors in armor swam over. They raised the halberds in their hands and created a powerful shockwave in the seawater. They stopped Hawkeye and T'Challa's actions and took the opportunity to rescue Namor. Chapter 1086. Chenong looked through the new documents sent by the UPA and saw the video attached to the documents. The satellite observation of the UPA was extremely accurate, and it clearly captured Natasha knocking on the door of Hawkeye's house. Even the color of her red hair was accurate. He handed the documents to Steve, and Captain America hurriedly flipped through the documents, showing his anger. He still remembered that when the Avengers lost their fighting spirit, Hawkeye took them to his home and asked his wife to entertain them and tell them what the Avengers were fighting for. But now, that party had caused irreversible consequences. Steve felt very guilty. There seemed to be a fire burning in his heart. "We must give Hawkeye an explanation," Steve said angrily. "We must avenge them. I will get to the bottom of this, even if it turns the world upside down." Natasha didn't do it. Chenong said. She was in charge of dealing with the vampires at the time, and the UPA submitted a detailed investigation report to prove her innocence. And there are reports that 3 days ago, the Soviet fleet destroyed the Skrulls' home planet and destroyed the Skrull Empire in the Andromeda Galaxy. The Skrulls invaded Earth as early as the 1990s. They have very advanced technology, and they are best at imitation and transformation. They can copy almost all the abilities of the imitated. Chenong handed over ASHILD file and said, "This is the relevant file of the incident in the 1990s. We applied to SHIELD for access. This may be the revenge of the remaining Skrull spies on Earth, in retaliation for the destruction of their country." Why did the UPA destroy the Skrulls? Steve asked. Slaughtering the women and children of an entire race should not be the behavior of a civilized country. In the 90s of the last century, the home planet of the Skrulls was occupied by the Star Devourer, a cosmic god that feeds on living planets. The Skrulls could not fight against this terrible existence, so they chose to invade other planets. The planets of other races that they conquered were all in the Andromeda Galaxy, which was too close to their home planet. They feared that the Star Devourer would shift its target to their new home planet after devouring their home planet. So they decided to choose a planet that was further away. They chose Earth. Do you know how the Skrulls will treat the indigenous people of Earth if their invasion succeeds? I have a document here, Chenong said. It's part of the information that the Revolutionary Alliance consulted before they decided to destroy the Skrulls. It's their military plan for invading Earth and their follow-up plan. Steve opened the translated document. He glanced at it and immediately covered the folder. The smell of blood between the lines made it difficult for him to contain his anger. Steve was not a good Samaritan. Otherwise, how could he have killed those German lads who had families and loved ones on the battlefield of World War II? He knew that there was a price to pay for war. War was killing. Therefore, after learning that the Skrulls were all soldiers and that aggression was second nature to them, he did not think that the lives of the Skrulls were more important than the safety of humans on Earth. Moreover, the Skrull Empire had committed many crimes. On Earth, because the water on this planet was too deep, they did not succeed. Instead, they suffered a big loss. But on the planets of other weak races, they caused genocide and planet destruction. They were used to fill the stomach of the Star Devourer. This race is not worthy of sympathy. The Revolutionary Alliance may have their own considerations, Steve said. Chenong took over the conversation. The Human Revolutionary Alliance has been working hard to protect this planet. The lawless lands are suspicious of us, but we have the same stance. You mean this tragedy may be a conspiracy of the Skrulls? Steve asked. Chenong nodded, and then Steve formally negotiated. I will help Hawkeye control his emotions, but you must give us an explanation as soon as possible. I believe that what Hawkeye needs is the truth, not to vent his emotions and pain. But the condition is that it must be the truth. If you hide even the slightest bit, we will investigate it ourselves. Moreover, the safe house where Hawkeye's family is located is a very high-level secret. After we went there last time, they had already moved the location of the safe house, but now it has been exposed. In the entire SHIELD, only Nick Fury and Coulson know where Hawkeye's family is. In addition, only a few Level 10 agents have the ability to investigate the location of the safe house through the previous residents, and Natasha is one of them. Where did the Skrulls get this top-secret information? Steve questioned. You need to give us the truth about these questions. Just then, Steve received a call from T'Challa. Steve, you should know the news. T'Challa said anxiously. Listen to me. After Hawkeye found out, he has already lost control. He is now rushing to the headquarters. You must stop him. This is obviously a conspiracy of the enemy. You can't let him make mistakes on impulse. He is losing his mind now, which is what the enemy wants. I will go back to stop him. If he wants revenge, I will accompany him. But I will also stop his irrational behavior. The Revolutionary Alliance has already informed us. They have evidence to prove that Natasha did not do it. Natasha, T'Challa was shocked. This has something to do with her? Hawkeye returned to the floating pyramid. In his anger, he did not even abide by the security regulations, but no one dared to stop the completely crazy Hawkeye. He put an arrow on his bow and shouted to the surroundings, "I have bled and sweated for you, and this is the result. I have retired. For you, Steve, for you, I came back to fight again. But you let my family suffer." Steve rushed over and saw Hawkeye's desperate and crazy face. He felt very guilty. He walked over and said painfully, "I'm sorry, brother." Hawkeye punched him in the face and knocked the captain to the ground. Steve did not resist. He let himself be knocked to the ground. Hawkeye held his bow and arrows and said to the surroundings, "Natasha, you come out. Natasha, I'm going to kill you." Steve got up and stopped him. Natasha didn't do this. Hawkeye continued to punch him in the face. This punch was full of strength, and the unprepared Captain America was stunned. Even with his strong recovery ability, it took him a while to recover. At this time, Natasha turned into a red shadow and kicked Hawkeye, who had his bow drawn and was aiming at Captain America. She used a set of close combat skills to force Hawkeye to block repeatedly, and the bow in his hand was basically useless. Natasha said, "You are very wrong, Hawkeye. The Hawkeye I know would never let his emotions get the better of him. You killed my family, and you still want me to be polite to you?" Hawkeye said, "A debt of blood can only be repaid with blood." Natasha did not argue. She wanted to capture Hawkeye before talking. After the strengthening of the Soviet body, Natasha's strength had changed qualitatively. In the past, Natasha relied on the combat skills she learned in the spy training camp, which emphasized skills, agility, and various small equipment on her body, such as electric shock devices or poison needles. So in the past, when Natasha encountered a strong enemy, it was always difficult for her to deal with them. She would either use the strength of her thigh, which was the strongest part of the head, to attack the carotid artery, which could make the enemy lose the ability to fight for a short time, or use poison needles, which was the assassination method she learned in the spy training camp. Or she would use the electric shock bracelet, a high-tech device made by SHIELD. But now, with one punch, Natasha could punch a pile of meat into the high-strength special concrete. Her own fist, her strength was very strong, which allowed her to have the power of a lion fighting a rabbit. Natasha's streamlined muscles began to expand and contract. Her arm rushed forward and smashed on Hawkeye's alloy bow. The high-tech bow made of super tough alloy was broken into two pieces. Hawkeye's arm was bent backward unnaturally. He let out a muffled groan and was sent flying. Natasha caught up with Hawkeye, who was still in the air. She grabbed his right arm and pulled her body like a bow. She threw Hawkeye to the ground and smashed him heavily. At this time, Steve stood in front of Natasha. He did not carry a shield, but used his equally strong physique to fight head-on with Natasha. Their reaction speed made the battle between them seem to be carried out at a super high speed. Their agile movements were so fast that it was hard to react. If an ordinary person were to brush past them, they would be hit with a bloody hole in their body. Hawkeye roared on the ground, grabbed an arrow, and stabbed it behind him. Natasha punched him hard in the joints, but Steve blocked the punch with his own chest. At the same time, the arrow in Hawkeye's hand pierced deep into his back and came out from the middle of his chest. Falcon Sam cried out in alarm, "Captain!" Natasha was also stunned. Hawkeye's mouth was wide open. He was shocked by his own accidental injury. Steve said with difficulty, "Now, can we sit down and have a good talk?" Sam rushed over and supported Steve. He looked at Natasha and Hawkeye fiercely and observed the captain's injury. "His internal organs are injured, stretcher." Strange hurriedly opened the portal to the medical room and helped Steve in with Sam. "I'm going to prepare for surgery." Strange said this and closed the portal. Natasha stood in the same place, looking at Steve's blood on her body. Hawkeye was also holding the broken alloy bow in a daze. Natasha saw the two pieces of the broken alloy bow and suddenly looked up. She grabbed Hawkeye's head and twisted it 360 degrees. She roared and pulled out Hawkeye's head along with his spine. Chapter 1087. Natalie forcibly pulled out Hawkeye's spine. Her body was covered in blood, and she looked like a valkyrie bathed in blood. This sudden turn of events shocked everyone. Coming back to his senses, Turkara roared in grief and indignation, summoning his battle suit and pouncing forward. Natalie lashed out with her leg, and the shadow of her leg collided with the panther's pouncing shadow, causing a visible shockwave. The others couldn't help but take a few steps back, opening up a large space in the middle. Black Panther took 4 or 5 steps back, his feet rooted to the ground, his arms crossed in front of his chest, and his body involuntarily retreated, leaving deep marks on the marble tiles. Black Panther still wanted to pounce, but Natasha had already pulled out the vibranium spear from the weapon rack beside her. This was a relic of the floating pyramids, a weapon used by the ancient Egyptian soldiers led by Enchantment. Natasha twirled the spear, and the vibranium spear in her hand glowed with silver light. Nothing could stand in its way, but speed was the only thing that could not be defeated. "If you do anything to me again, I'm going to be serious," Natasha said solemnly. Turkara growled, "You killed Hawkeye." "I didn't kill Hawkeye," Natasha explained. She glanced at Hawkeye's head, signaling everyone to go back and observe. At this time, Turkara took a closer look at Hawkeye's head and also noticed that something was wrong. After Hawkeye died, his skin began to turn slightly green, and some small scales appeared on his face. "This isn't Hawkeye." Chinong went up to pick up the dead man's head and studied it for a while before explaining to the others. "Then what the hell is it?" Turkara looked at the head solemnly, as well as the body that had its spine pulled out and was still spewing blood. The human skin color faded little by little, and tiny green scales appeared on its body. The body began to change shape, and the skin on Hawkeye's head began to shrink. Its nose became short and protruding, and without a nose bridge, its ears began to become pointy. "Ugh, it looks like a goblin." Peter, the little spider who was newly brought into the Holy Shield by Captain America, said in disgust. "The Skrulls. They are an alien race that has the ability to transform and imitate other races. A few days ago, the Divine Revolutionary Alliance blew up their home planet and destroyed the Skrull Empire." Chinong put on his gloves and began the autopsy. He carefully lifted the 2 parts of the body and placed them on the stretcher next to him. "I was going to ask for a few Skrull corpses from the IPL and dissect them for you to see, but now that I've seen them, there's no need." The little spider asked cautiously, "You don't need us to look?" Chinong turned around and smiled. "You have to observe them on the spot to know the physiological characteristics of the Skrulls, so everyone has to go, but you don't have to apply for a corpse specimen from the Revolutionary Alliance, because we have one on the scene. Natasha, just break its neck, and it will be ready for a while. Then we'll have a living specimen. Moreover, we can get the whereabouts of Hawkeye from its mouth." "Hawkeye should have been attacked by them," Natasha said. "If the Skrulls disguise themselves as someone important to Hawkeye and suddenly attack him, it will be very difficult for him to escape. Moreover, the target of the disguise is easy to imitate. If the Skrulls have studied the reference in detail, then this kind of disguise is difficult to see through. Even Hawkeye can't, and the Skrulls are not lacking in research. The attack on Hawkeye's home has disturbed his mind, and if the Skrulls disguise themselves as his children, all the heroes present sucked in a breath of cold air. This tactic was too vicious. There was no one there who was free. If they allowed the Skrulls to attack their kin and then disguise themselves as their kin, just the thought of it gave them an irrepressible rage and murderous intent. Don't worry. As soon as I got the information, I sent people to secretly protect your friends and relatives." Chunong said, "I'll send you the relevant files of SHILD and the Soviet information on the Skrulls later." Turkara stood up, looked at the corpse that had completely turned into a Skrull, and said to Natasha, "I'm sorry, I was impulsive." Natasha shook her head. "Don't say sorry. I'm afraid they chose to frame me because of my identity, and they didn't do anything to me because of my identity. We're comrades, so we don't have to care about such a small matter." "Your identity?" Peter made a fuss. "What is your identity? Why would they frame you?" "I'm a Soviet warrior, and I'm no stranger to them. It was also our fleet that destroyed their civilization, and the remaining Skrulls on Earth probably hate us to the core. but they're also afraid of you. Chenong said. The Black Star Warriors have an intuition system called Iron Will, which allows you to see through their behavior patterns in an instant. The reason why the Human Revolutionary Alliance let the Soviets deal with the Skrulls is because you're not afraid of them sneaking in. Natasha then explained, the transformation of the Skrulls is at the genetic level, and their unique DNA can mimic the genes of carbon-based organisms, so we can't distinguish them by DNA testing. When I saw Hawkeye, I began to doubt it, because Hawkeye wouldn't be so irrational. Even if his family was killed, he wouldn't be so easily used. He would be calm enough to investigate the murderer and then get his revenge. Then I took the initiative to attack him, wanting to test his behavior through the attack. Sure enough, I smelled a familiar smell, but I ignored the captain's sudden intervention. I wasn't prepared at that time, so he pretended to injure the captain. At that time, I knew that I had to solve this misunderstanding as soon as possible, so as not to deepen the suspicion and misunderstanding between us. When I saw the broken part of his bow, I was completely sure that he was a fake. Because Hawkeye's weapon, we've already modified him, adding a kind of resonant gold alloy. The fake one is an old version of S-H-I-E-L-D. The fastest way to reveal their true colors is to kill them and let their corpses show up. The transformation of the Skrulls is related to their blood. Even if they're killed, they won't show their original form. Only when they lose 80% of their blood and lose the important element of transformation will they return to their original form as soon as possible. Chenong explained, but some of the Skrull transformation masters can fix their corpses into their transformed form. Natasha, you are too reckless. Its strength is far from the level of the transformation masters. It's not even as good as Hawkeye. Natasha said, Hawkeye is not so easy to be attacked by me. If it was a transformation master, it would be difficult for me to beat them. Fortunately, these elite Skrull tactical masters have been killed by our Black Star troopers. There are definitely no more than 3 of them on Earth now. Chenong picked up the broken bow and looked at it carefully. S-H-I-E-L-D may have a Skrull mole. In fact, they are very good imitations, exactly the same as Hawkeye's bow. The reason why they haven't changed to a new version is probably because they don't know the formula of this new resonant gold alloy. The Soviets have destroyed many Skrull fleets, and they have weapons specially developed for the Skrull transformation ability. I'll apply, Natasha said hurriedly. Natasha. Chenong stopped her. We can't do that. Natasha was puzzled. As long as we get that kind of weapon, we can make all the Skrulls on this planet show their true colors. This is a political issue. Of course, we can do this on the territory of the PRL, but no Skrull would dare to act wildly on the land of the PRL. But if we use weapons on the territory of sovereign countries like the United States, the PRL will certainly not allow it. They have concerns. But we can do it in the name of the Holy Shield, Natasha said. Chenong shook his head. Now is not the time when we exterminated the vampires. S-H-I-L-D has come back to take back their power, and now, in the Holy Shield, you have to get their consent. But Nick Fury will not agree. I have just spoken to him, and he is against us acting on our own. Now they still want to fight for power? Natasha asked. Not for power, but to control the influence of the PRL in the Holy Shield. If everything, including the crisis in the United States and other sovereign countries, is handled by the PRL, then what will S-H-I-L-D become? That one-eyed man will not let S-H-I-E-L-D lose its influence. And they also have the ability to deal with the invasion of the Skrulls. Don't forget that they won the last war without us. So what reason do they have to let us continue to expand our influence? Natasha's H-I-L-D needs this victory to cope with the pressure of the World Security Council, to integrate its own forces and to regroup. This is politics, and all the orders issued by the brain of an organization originate from politics. Politics determines their behavior, determines their brothers and sisters. Unfortunately, the people here are only brothers and sisters. So we can't get military support from the PRL, and these heroes. Chen Ong pointed to the Western heroes. They can't interfere with SHIELD's decision. Natasha lowered her head and was silent for a long time. Finally, she raised her head and flicked her red hair. She said helplessly, "Then what can we do? Rescue Hawkeye." The Skrulls have not obtained Hawkeye's weapon, which proves that they have not yet controlled Hawkeye. When Steve finishes his surgery, I will tell him the current situation. He should be very happy to clear up the misunderstanding between us and eliminate the tension of suspicion. Then some of us will rescue Hawkeye, and I will personally negotiate with the Inhumans. The war is about to begin. Chapter 1088. After Ulysses Crow occupied Wakanda, he used cruel and ruthless means to maintain his rule. He knew that he had no foundation to rule, nor did he have any tradition to uphold. He knew that he ruled this country by violence and coercion. So Crow did not plan to be open-minded and tolerant. His rule relied on power. He made the people of Wakanda afraid to maintain his authority. He sold Wakanda's interest, vibranium, in exchange for the acquiescence of the outside world to his rule. Therefore, the people of Wakanda were prohibited from possessing and touching vibranium, and their technological products were restricted. Now, they had no chance of obtaining high technology. Mojin here could only buy North American technology like most people in the African continent. Congratulations to the United States of America. There was another expanding market. Every day, a large amount of vibranium was mined and sent to Ulysses' laboratory. A huge vibranium tower was built here. The tower used the ultimate technology that Ulysses had learned from the modification methods given to him by Adam. He tried to bypass the mechanical structure of the human body designed by Adam and to weaponize the physics of vibration, acoustics, and structural mechanics, the properties of superconductive metals, and the metallization of the human body into one of the 12 types of energy release states. Ulysses Crow was never a puppet at the mercy of others. He had been trying to understand and absorb the 12 stages of vibranium created by Adam. Because in this new technological martial arts, Adam had integrated too many martial arts principles in human body science, making each stage a natural mode, and the power of each stage was also very different. Now, Ulysses, who only had 4 stages, could only collapse the Earth's core and destroy this planet. But this kind of power could be achieved by a low-level frigate of the People's Revolutionary Alliance. He longed for more powerful power, until the resonance of the universe in the 12th stage, transcending the realm of time and space. He could destroy the multiverse with a wave of his hand, and he could destroy other parallel worlds with vibration. However, the 12 stages of vibrating gold, left behind by Adam, was too difficult to comprehend, and the principles contained in it were something that Crow would never be able to comprehend in his entire life. However, he believed that the most difficult part was the principles of martial arts and the human body. He tried to separate the acoustic technology of the later stages in the blueprint so that he could overcome the obstacles of the stages designed by Adam and directly obtain the power to destroy the world. 3 years ago, when Ulysses began to study the design and experimental data, he found that among the 12 types of energy release states of vibration physics, acoustics, and structural mechanics, the properties of superconductive metals, and the metallization of the human body, even if the contents of the human body and martial arts were excluded, the remaining technology not only included the familiar content of acoustics, but also cosmology, structural mechanics, and vibration physics. Transforming mature technology and extracting the basic science and technology was a huge project that Ulysses could not imagine. But even so, it was much easier than practicing the 12 stages of vibranium. Ulysses found that to complete this project, he needed an unimaginable amount of vibranium. So when he completed the 4th stage in 3 years, he began to prepare for the early stage of technology. He designed a huge vibration laboratory that integrated all his understanding and knowledge. A vibranium tower with a complex structure that could be in harmony with the background vibration of the universe, imitating the final stage of the universe tuning realm. He named this tower the universe tuning fork. After occupying Wakanda, Ulysses relied on day and night to excavate the vibranium mine and finally began to build this laboratory that he designed with his own hands. During this time, less than 1% of the vibranium flowed into the market for funds, which was already tens of thousands of times more than the original Wakanda released. The rest of the vibranium was invested in this project by Crow. For this purpose, he relied on violence to collect the vibranium high-tech products produced in Wakanda, and even robbed the Wakanda people of their vibranium. Even the weapons of the Wakanda King's guards were melted by him. Today, Crow finally finished building this laboratory, the universe tuning fork. Standing at the top of the laboratory tower, Crow felt fear in his heart. He seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be talking to a black shadow next to him. You know what? There's a big problem with my design, and it's impossible to succeed. At least it can't be like this, exquisite and wonderful, or even perfect. This laboratory perfectly repeated my vision, creating the power of the 12th stage. But it is precisely because of this that I feel sincere fear. I'm not creating this giant tower, but it's growing by itself. Now, I firmly believed that the Black Kitten was right. Vibranium was alive. When I used it to create that damn 12 stages, it was like it began to communicate with my brain. Countless ideas, countless inspirations were stuffed into my brain. Then I designed it like I was possessed, but I can't even fully understand it. Although it's something I created with my own hands, it's more like it created itself through my hands. Vibranium is a huge, perfect life. Compared to it, I'm not suitable for the design. This feeling, it's like it obtained the 12 stages of vibranium from me and then easily cultivated this technique that seemed to be tailor-made for it to the 12th stage. As for me, I'm just a tool to make it a cultivation tool. Ulysses looked at his hands, as if he had returned to the shadow in front of Adam, the shadow that he was deeply afraid of. I even began to fear it. It was fear that made me impatiently create it, but when it appeared in front of me, that unknown, urgent fear became it. The universe tuning fork can monitor the background sound of the entire universe. It can know everything in the universe, feel every bit of energy moving in the universe, every vibration. It can also amplify your strength and energy. It's a perfect weapon. With it, you could destroy a galaxy with the volume of a single word, as simple as breaking a bubble. But it's not just a weapon. Ulysses turned back and said, I don't know what prompted you to help me create it. Now you can use its power. This is my promise, but those who play with fire will burn themselves. Be careful of its power. Don't do anything dangerous. I allow the master behind you to temporarily use it to carry out some conspiracy, but this can't hinder my interests. Ebony Throat laughed in the shadow. You've kept your promise, of course. We won't go back on it. Only I can use its power perfectly. Klaus murmured. So, this won't be a wrong choice. He was very afraid, and he kept repeating in his heart, he's already gone, left this universe. In this world, only I understand it the best. You won't come back, Adam, he whispered in his heart, his voice very low, as if a slightly louder voice would be perceived by an existence that he deeply feared. Ebony Throat said softly, after you destroy the war weapons created by the Kree people on the moon, we hope that you can support Maximus. At that time, he will represent the Inhumans and stand on our side. I need the Black Bat King as a test subject. A few years ago, I happened to hear a voice from the moon. His power is not stronger than mine. Although he can destroy a planet with his voice and destroy an interstellar fleet with a whisper, he can't control this power at all. When I heard his voice, I understood. My chance to break through the 5th level lies with him. But at that time, I was still alone, until you came to me and promised to help me fulfill these wishes. Then, I promised to repay you. Now that I have the universe tuning fork, I can easily destroy those so-called Inhumans. Your previous support will be rewarded. Give me Maximus information. You will get what you want. After the two colluded for a while, Ebony Throat went to inform Maximus of their decision, and Ulysses came to the universe tuning fork. He stood at the highest level of the tower and said softly to the moon above his head. In the city of Atlan on the moon, a sound wave swept through the entire city. Amidst the violent tremors, the mutants were extremely terrified. Many people had lost their lives to that whisper, and their king had fallen into a deep sleep. He was extremely terrified in his dream, but he could not wake up. Just 3 minutes ago, that destructive sound wave had swept through everything. After the tremors subsided, Maximus led his people into the palace. Facing Queen Medusa, who stood in front of him, Maximus said, "What are you doing? Do you want to let this monster destroy our country?" Medusa screamed, "This monster is your brother. He can't control his power. He killed my parents and brought disaster to the Inhumans. If we don't stop him, are we going to wait for him to destroy us?" Maximus said sternly. He had his supporters behind him, as well as other powerful families and elders of the Inhumans. He has already controlled his power. Ever since that incident, he has not spoken again. You can't treat him like this. Could it be that everything that happened just now was my brother talking in his sleep? Maximus looked gloomily at Medusa and the other supporters of King Blackbat. He raised his hand and said, "Banish them. Banish them to Earth. Let that monster wreak havoc on mankind." The people who supported him behind him shouted loudly, "Banish this monster who hurt us. We don't have a king who kills his father. Chase them to Earth, or they will destroy Atlan's city and our home." Medusa trembled in the face of this tsunami of cheers. She did not know what to do. King Blackbat was not an authoritative king. He accidentally killed his parents and did not say a word all year round. Such a king could not be supported. His brother was ambitious and eloquent. Under his provocation, the Inhumans finally rose up and demanded that their king be banished. It was believed that soon, his brother Maximus would be crowned king under the support of the people. Chapter 1089. What a pitiful creature! Chun Ong stared at King Blackbat, who was struggling in the wilderness. He could see that this king, who had lived alone since he was young, was quite incompetent after leaving his throne. Now he, who knew nothing about the truth of the matter, naively thought that he could not control his own ability and caused harm to the Inhumans. So now he was afraid of his own ability and rejected it psychologically. In order not to hurt anyone, he had essentially chosen to exile himself. That was why Chun Ong saw a man like a tramp, struggling in the wilderness of Wakanda. Little Chili Pepper Potts, who was standing next to him, stood there with him for a long time. She observed the confused and downtrodden man below and asked curiously, "Now everyone is waiting for the results of Steve's surgery, and you deliberately came here to stand here and peep at a downtrodden man?" The Holy Shield's observation equipment detected a spatial fluctuation, and a group of people sneaked into Earth from the moon. This man was specially sent to Wakanda. You know how sensitive the aliens who have appeared in Wakanda are now. We must come to see if he has anything to do with Thanos' alliance. Chenong had a legitimate reason. "So what have you observed now?" Potts asked. "Why is he here? Should we arrest him and interrogate him? Or pretend to meet him by chance and test him?" "No need," Chenong said. "I know who he is." Potts carefully looked at King Blackbat and said, "He should have a very noble identity." Looking at the surprised look in Chenong's eyes, Potts explained, "You know, I have seen a lot in the upper class. It is not common to see a man with his temperament. Cultivation is something that is rooted in the bones, and it will not change because of temporary circumstances. So, after seeing so much of Stark, do you want to change your taste?" Chenong said, "I can arrange a mission for you to come into contact with him." "There's no need for that." Potts said, "I don't want Tawny to go crazy. Although I've broken up with him, you should know that he's not the kind of person who will be free and easy after breaking up. In a sense, he's a narrow-minded man." "Ha! If Stark knew what you thought of him, he probably wouldn't be satisfied with your evaluation of his masculinity. In your eyes, he may be successful, humorous, witty, and smart enough, but in my eyes, he's like a boy who hasn't grown up yet. He's calculative and overly concerned about what the outside world thinks of him. He likes to show off, and he's sharp and weird. He's the kind of man who could date supermodels while treating me as his appendage." To say that he is self-centered is definitely not an exaggeration, but an understatement. He thinks of himself as the man of the world. Potts complained. As a change in life, or should I say, a target for flirting, he's good enough. But as a boyfriend, he's such a jerk. I can see that, Chenong said sympathetically. It's hard for you to put up with him. That's because he's good enough. Potts said frankly. He also has a lot of good points. I've never received his trust from anyone else. If he had just a little more sense of responsibility, I would be able to put up with his temper and willfulness. The one down there is the king of the Inhumans. The Inhumans are a race of mutated humans who live in a city on the moon. As far as I know, they're related to the Kori people, but the Kori people are just a cover. Behind them is a branch of the ancient humans, the mutated humans who built the astral civilization, Chunong began to introduce. After the ancient humans were brought to this universe from a parallel universe by the Creator, the ancient humans who were enemies of the Creator had a branch that was born with powerful abilities. They created a powerful astral civilization in other galaxies. But in this process, the star souls that evolved from the mutants lost their most powerful ability. Their new generation was born with extraordinary intelligence, extremely strong physical qualities, and terrifying psychic abilities. But they lost their miracle. There was a variety of miraculous superpowers that appeared among them. Those superpowers were known as the Omega level. They had the miraculous ability to subvert the basic rules of the universe. One of the leaders of the mutated humans, the Dark Inquisitor, the leader of the Brotherhood, believed that the technology and psychic abilities of the Astrals could not fight against the Creator. Everyone knew that only Omega had hope of defeating him. This was because the leaders of the mutated humans and Astrals believed that the Creator was the most powerful Omega. So, they decided to continue experimenting. To recreate an Omega. Potts was deep in thought. They created the Inhumans? Yes. Because of fear, they did not dare to come close to Earth. So they used the Kree people, mind control, or something else. The Kori people could not withstand a single blow from the Astrals. They used the humans recreated by the Creator on Earth as test subjects in an attempt to replicate the special abilities of their race. In the end, they created the Inhumans. So, in front of us is a noble king who is in distress. Potts exaggeratedly made an I'm very surprised expression and said, "Is this the daily life of a superhero? And an alien prince in distress?" Thor won the bid. Or an alien prince who wanted to invade Earth? Asgard won the bid again. Loki expressed regret. Or an alien king's Earth illegitimate child? Star-Lord looked innocent. Or a former alien king who was exiled to Earth? Are the Inhumans aliens? Potts asked, "Deal?" "No, Wonder Tani can't forget about this profession. It's really cool." "What kind of king are these?" Chenong snorted. "They're just mouse kings. In a large sample of experiments, they are indeed meaningful and natural control group. Let's go and get in touch with them." Chenong looked at King Black Bat, who was already approaching Bonanzana, and gestured. "It seems that he has decided not to use his superpower anymore. We'd better get in touch with them, lest this inhuman king who rejects his own abilities dies because of the reckless actions of some Earth gangster or tribal armed forces. That would be a diplomatic dispute. He was exiled to Earth by his own people. What does his death have to do with Earth?" Potts said casually. "The son of an African chief smuggled into the United States and was shot and killed by a local gangster. Even the U.S. government has to give an explanation." Chun Ong shrugged. "Especially when the current king of this emirate wants to conquer the United States." Potts laughed so hard that he could not stand straight. "Is there such a stupid emirate?" Chapter 1090. King Blackbat was in a sorry state. He had been struggling in the wilderness and had been training his body with sound waves all year round, making his physical strength extraordinary. However, this did not give him much experience in surviving in the wilderness. He did not know how to get water or where to get food. King Blackbat, who had been locked up in a small black house since he was a child, lacked the experience of surviving alone. This was Wakanda. There were rushing rivers passing through grand canyons, grasslands and forests in the high mountains, and deserts in the Gobi Desert. King Blackbat was wearing a tight-fitting leather coat. He cupped a handful of water on the riverbank and brought it close to his dry mouth. There were many hippopotamuses and crocodiles in the river. A Nile crocodile more than 3 meters long, disguised as a dead tree, slowly approached him. King Blackbat noticed this animal, but he did not know how cold-blooded and ruthless it was. There were no crocodiles on the moon, no forests on the moon, and no rivers on the moon. Everything was new to him. He stared at the animal, and it stared back at him with its pale yellow vertical pupils. The eyes of this cold-blooded animal only had the focus and indifference of a predator. King Blackbat suddenly felt a little curious. He could not help but reach out, wanting to touch this beautiful creature. He did not know what kind of dangerous action he was doing. The only animal King Blackbat had seen before was a bat, which was brought back from Earth by his father after his ability was awakened. It was a small, gray, furry creature with pink membranous wings and 2 small claws at the end of the membrane. The young King Blackbat fed this little thing with the insects he raised. He loved this little pet so much that he even named himself Blackbat after this creature. This love lasted until his younger brother, Maximus, murdered the little creature out of jealousy. Now he saw these energetic animals again, so he reached out his hand unguardedly, wanting to touch them, just like he had touched the little pet before. He had no idea of the danger involved. If you want to lose that hand, someone's voice came from behind. You can continue. King Blackbat retracted his hand in shock. He turned his head to look behind him, but he did not know that his sudden action had triggered the crocodile's instinctive reaction. It opened its mouth wide and began to dive forward, ready to bite his hand and then do a death roll. In the blink of an eye, a figure appeared in front of Blackbat King. The figure was extremely fast, at least faster than a crocodile. When the crocodile swayed its thick mouth and drilled out of the water, the figure was already standing in front of it. With a swing of his hand, his right fist smashed into the crocodile's upper jaw, closing its open mouth and smashing it into the water. We still have 10 minutes to chat. Any longer, and Crow's lackeys will be here. Chenong looked at his watch and gestured to the Blackbat King. I know you have a lot of questions, but you can't speak. Chenong took out a helmet made of black matte plastic that looked like a motorcycle helmet. On both sides of the helmet were 2 ears that stood up like those of a wolf dog, which were equipped with radio and brainwave detection devices. The mask covered the upper half of the face, revealing only the part below the nose. Potts once complained, "Why did you add a pair of dog ears to the mask?" For this reason, Chun Ong had to explain, "Those are bad ears." Fortunately, although Medusa, the wife of the Blackbat King, had a dog, it did not have such ears, so he would not complain about the mask's design. Chun Ong motioned for the Blackbat King to put on. The Blackbat King hesitated for a moment, then chose to believe that they had no ill intentions and put on the mask. At this time, he felt as if his brain had come into contact with some numb electric current. This electric wave triggered his special ability, which made him very nervous. He wanted to say something to Chun Ong, but few people could understand his self-created sign language. At this time, a hoarse, magnetic, low male voice sounded from the lower jaw of the mask. It sounded like 2 magnets rubbing against each other. "What is this thing?" The hoarse, metallic, somewhat deep and dark, masculine voice made Potts' eyes light up. Chenong replied, "It's a gadget that can help you speak. It's a brainwave detector installed on the ear of the helmet. It can read the brainwave activity in the speech area of your brain and convert it into audio signals to help you speak. We know that you don't want to speak and use your ability, so we made this thing. It's very useful, but I'm not used to this voice," the Blackbat King said as he touched the generator under his chin. "You can match the shape of your mouth. This will make people more accustomed to it. Otherwise, if you make a sound without moving your mouth, it will look like a dub. As for the voice, this is the version specially made by Bruce. It sounds like the voice of a wandering beast in a dark criminal city that terrifies criminals, right?" Chenong said, "Well, Blackbat King, I know your situation. Your people have exiled you, and your brother has usurped your position. He even secretly separated you from your followers. You are now being hunted, and we are here to rescue you." Hunted? The Blackbat King was a little surprised. "But I'm on Earth. You don't have any enemies on Earth, but you still have a good brother. You don't think he will let you go just like that, do you? He exiled you to Earth, but you are still a thorn in his side, so he must get rid of you. What could be simpler and easier than getting rid of you by the hands of the people on Earth? So he asked his allies on Earth to kill you. He can also use this as an excuse to persuade the mutants on the moon to invade Earth. Are you the enemies of his allies on Earth? Or the people who protect Earth? The Black Bat King asked. Protect Earth? Chun-Ong asked rhetorically, then answered himself, No, I am protecting you. To protect a little white rabbit that thinks it's strong and dares to provoke its gigantic carnivorous neighbor from being harmed by its rude big black bear that is baring its fangs and has a bloody mouth full of stench and sharp teeth. We are the Rare Animal Protection Association of Earth. Our main purpose is to protect those minority groups from extinction, lest they cause misfortune because of the current tense situation on Earth. Oh, you say it as if the extinction of the vampires was not done by you, Boz mocked. It's us. Chun-Ong said casually, You need us here. Please remember, you are one of us. The Black Bat King said calmly. So, where do you want to take me? To the Holy Shield Brotherhood, our headquarters. There, we need to ask you a question about the attitude of the mutants on the moon. Is it war, peace, destruction, or survival? Black Bat King, you will decide the future of your race. Don't call me Black Bat King. I have been exiled by my people, and I am no longer qualified to be a king. Chapter 1091, Floating Pyramid. On Chun-Ang's desk, near the computer, was a peculiar orange-yellow flower, the Stairway of the Sun. Sunlight flowed from the top of the floating pyramid, along the golden-yellow radiant alloy into the interior of the pyramid. Through the patterns of the alloy, the sunlight radiated onto the Stairway of the Sun, containing a mysterious message. The pollen released by the Stairway of the Sun floated up the steps of the pyramid, undergoing a mysterious reaction with the sunlight. Very few in the Holy Shield Brotherhood knew that the Ndapaya tribe that worshipped the Stairway of the Sun had actually planted them on a stepped pyramid. Now that the Ndapaya tribe had been destroyed by the Atlanteans, and Namor had submerged that pyramid, very few were aware of this matter. Apart from Chun-Ong, perhaps only Steve knew a little about it. As for Namor, who had submerged the Ndapaya tribe and knew the most about this mysterious ritual, he would definitely not reveal what he knew to the Holy Shield Brotherhood. He also wouldn't be able to guess the relationship between the Holy Shield Brotherhood and this strange plant. In the ancient Ndapaya tribe's mysterious ritual, their successors would be infected by a sealed artifact like the Black Panther. The Black Panther would consume a heart-shaped herb, while the Ndapaya's successor would ascend the Stairway of the Sun pyramid on a sunny day and be infected by the pollen. They would undergo stringent checks and procedures to ensure there weren't any wounds on their bodies. The pollen would infect the mucous membranes of their lungs through breathing, and the viral pollen would alter their DNA. However, the successor had to ensure there weren't any fresh wounds on their bodies. Otherwise, the pollen infection through the bloodline would be too intense and uncontrollable. The slow transformation and infection that originally required 3 days and 3 nights would be accelerated to a mere few minutes due to the blood infection. Then, the transformation ritual would completely fail, and the violent transformation would kill the infected. Then, the resurrection from their corpses would be a monster with only hunger and bloodlust. The name of the Stairway of the Sun originated from this mysterious ritual. The Stairway of the Sun represented that when the sun shines on its flowers, it would emit a pale, golden pollen that floated upwards in the sunlight. As for the stairway, it represented the unique characteristic of the Ndapaya tribe. The Stairway Pyramid was a ceremonial structure created by the Ndapaya tribe. The Stairway Pyramid utilized the energy of sunlight to gradually congregate the pollen released by the Stairway of the Sun from the bottom of the pyramid to the top. Then, it utilized the mysterious information of sunlight to activate the viral vitality within the pollen. What the other members of the Holy Shield Brotherhood didn't understand was that in ancient times, the reason why Enhatien chose the step of the pyramid as a war fortress was because he needed to use this Stairway of the Sun to repeat the Ndapaya ritual, utilizing the corrosive properties of pollen to create powerful warriors. Now, The hall at the top of the pyramid where the Brotherhood of the Holy Shield was used as a meeting hall was the location of the warrior's transformation. Time gradually approached noon. The pot of Stairway of the Sun that Shin-Ong placed on the table was only a small and insignificant plant. In the laboratory at the bottom of the floating pyramid, in a hall that had been transformed into a plantation, large patches of Stairway of the Sun that had been rescued and cultivated for observation were releasing large amounts of golden pollen. The pollen was like a golden stream of air, passing through the laboratory's heavy defenses as if there was nothing there. There were vibranium energy conductors reserved for the ritual, as well as vibranium conductors for the pollen to rise to the top. These lines, which were seen as ancient Egyptian decorative patterns, turned into a pure gold luster after being contaminated with the pollen, and the activated pollen was energized and conducted to the top. As the flowing golden energy gradually converged to the top, there were still traces of the tragedy that had just occurred. The head of the fake Hawkeye, which had been pulled out along with its spine, was placed in the operating room. His body had just been dissected, and Captain America, Steve, who had just undergone surgery, was lying on a hospital bed in a ward not far away. The medical facilities of the entire Holy Shield headquarters were located on the top floor, which was designed by Shin-Ong. After the dispute, most of the heroes of the Holy Shield had left the top floor. Only Falcon Sam insisted on accompanying Steve, who had just finished his surgery. The golden energy quietly began to converge at the top floor. When it contaminated the body of the fake Hawkeye, the energized, virulent pollen came into contact with the flesh and blood and quickly began to infect the body. The head, which was placed next to the body along with its spine, suddenly opened its eyes. Steve, who was lying on the hospital bed, suddenly frowned. His wound was a little itchy. It was warm, like the itch of the sun shining on a wound that had just grown granulation. The golden energy flow-like pollen began to be released from the vibranium alloy lines on the ground. As the pollen, with an aggregating effect, came into contact with the wound, it began to infect the blood, and the golden energy flowed toward his wound. Captain America's body began to struggle and tremble instinctively, alarming Sam, who was accompanying him. "Hey, Captain," Sam asked with concern, but Captain America did not answer. Instead, he trembled more and more. Sam panicked a little. After checking on Steve's condition, he called Strange. "Come here, Steve's condition isn't right," Sam said anxiously. Steve began to tremble violently on the hospital bed. His wound began to grow granulation and was healing rapidly, but Steve did not relax. Instead, he was in more pain as he struggled on the bed. The energy of the pollen began to erode the depths of his body. In the operating room, a large number of granulation sprouts grew on the body of the fake Hawkeye. These densely packed granulation sprouts crawled all over his body like tentacles. His head began to change back to the appearance of an Hawkeye. He was connected to his head, and his spine was exposed to the air. A large number of bone spurs grew on his vertebrae, like a human skull centipede. The bone spurs trembled and began to move like the limbs of an arthropod. At first, they only shook twice, but soon they all began to move, crawling on the ground. The centipede-like spine crawled back to the back of the body, and pale bone spurs clasped the ribs. The huge wound on the lower jaw, which had been torn by the Black Widow, began to be covered with granulation sprouts. The face that resembled a Hawkeye was extremely hideous. His jaw was wide open, like a deep-sea fish. His mouth, which could open and close 180 degrees like a python, was full of sharp teeth. A fleshy snake-like tongue could shoot out at any time and pierce through the head of his former companion. Dr. Strange quickly teleported to Steve's ward. He found Sam pressing down on Steve, who was struggling nonstop. Steve's whole body was red, and he struggled with all his might. The arteries in his neck were bulging, and the veins on his face were popping out. He had completely lost consciousness and kept screaming. After a simple examination, Strange said with a solemn expression, "It may be a virus infection. We don't know what the source of the infection is yet." Steve suddenly sat up against Sam's pressure. Only then did Strange notice that the wound on Steve's back was constantly eroding the wound with a golden energy flow. Steve's wound had completely healed, but golden blood spots began to spread from the wound to the rest of his body. Strange was stunned for a moment and shouted, "Quickly help the captain transfer the infection. The source of the infection is from the ward. We must leave quickly." Sam had to carry the captain on his back. They pushed open the door of the ward. There was a monster waiting there. It was a zombie that vaguely looked like an eagle. Dozens of bone spur-like appendages pierced through the skin on its back, and the fingers of its hands and feet had suction disc-like organs that allowed it to lie on the wall. Its bloody mouth was open more than 180 degrees, and behind the 2 rows of sharp teeth, a fleshy snake-like tongue was ready to shoot out at any time. Strange stood in front of them. He opened his magic shield and faced the monster. He said solemnly, "Is this a conspiracy of the Skrulls? They sent this body here to use it to carry out a biochemical attack?" At this moment, a tongue ejected from the mouth of the fake Eagle Eye. The monster climbed on the wall like a spider, and as it ejected the tongue, it leaped forward. The bone spurs on its back tightened and suddenly shot out one by one. Several bone spurs and a tongue flew toward Strange. Strange could only use his magic shield to protect Sam, who was carrying Steve on his back. Then he took out the crimson energy belt and threw it at the sticky tongue. The magic belt wrapped around the tongue, and the magic shield blocked the bone spurs. But at this time, the tip of the tongue suddenly ejected a dagger-like bone spur. The whole process was so fast that there was no time for Strange to react. The bone spur stabbed into Strange's shoulder. In order to cover Sam and Steve behind him, Strange did not dodge. He was carried up by the bone spur and nailed to the wall behind him. In a moment of desperation, Sam wanted to go up and help, but Strange covered his shoulder with his hand and stopped him. "Take the captain to a safe place. I'll deal with this." Sam knew the importance of the situation. He sincerely thanked Strange. "Be careful, Dr. Strange. I'll call for backup right away." Sam sprinted towards the exit leading to the lower level. But at this time, Captain America on his back suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were completely black, and there was no white in them. Captain America's twitching face was extremely ferocious. Sam didn't even turn his head. He whispered, "Hang in there, Captain, it's almost done." Steve bit down on Sam's throat. His teeth, which were already sharpening, tore open Sam's unguarded carotid artery. At this time, Black Widow, who was on the lower level, sensed that something was wrong. She rushed over and saw everything with her own eyes. She raised her leg and kicked Captain America's head. Steve, who was biting a large piece of Sam's flesh, windpipe, and esophagus, was kicked away. Sam's throat spat out blood. He looked at Black Widow in horror. He wanted to say something, but his leaky windpipe could only make hissing sounds. Black Widow rushed over to stop the bleeding. Steve, who was behind her, was still struggling. Black Widow turned around and kicked his head, but he didn't react at all. T'Challa, who was following closely, saw this scene and did something that Natasha couldn't believe. Chapter 1092. Before Crow's lackeys arrived, Chun-Ong and Potts had already left with King Blackbat and headed for the headquarters of the Holy Shield, the floating pyramid. They boarded the remodeled Sun ship. The original semi-open hull had been remodeled into a closed one. The logistics personnel of the original Divine Spear Bureau had redesigned it, transforming it into a near-Earth spacecraft with a modern design. The cabin had also been expanded by several times. The original structure of the ship was made of gold alloy, and it had been transformed into the core of the ship through the IPL's atomic-level material recombination equipment. The other parts of the ship were modularized onto the core. In this way, the original relatively narrow interior space of the Sun ship was expanded without damaging the core combat power to meet the diverse combat needs of the Holy Shield Brotherhood. Therefore, Chun-Ong and Potts had a spacious cabin of about 120 square meters to communicate with King Blackbat. Frankly speaking, we hope that you can kill your way back and get rid of that annoying brother of yours, so that he doesn't cause us any more trouble. Chun-Ong said bluntly, "When I say get rid of him, I mean literally get rid of. Do you understand? You want me to kill Maximus?" King Blackbat's voice was low. Ong used Bruce's voice, which made his words particularly intimidating. This was very advantageous in intimidating the enemy and in negotiations. It could show that he was a courageous and tenacious person. A voice was just a voice. King Blackbat had never been a decisive person, and Batman was decisive in not trusting anyone. Even if Ong cosplayed him like Batman, he would never become the Dark Knight in Gotham Shadow. Therefore, Ong, who clearly knew this guy's weak nature, would not be fooled by the illusion created by his bad taste. He said frankly, "Yes, I want you to kill him. Otherwise, if he makes any wrong choice, the Holy Shield will have to kill your entire family, no matter how reluctant it is. There's an old saying in China, a strong man cuts his wrist. Understand, we have been restraining ourselves." King Blackbat said, "Whether or not to kill my brother, a member of the royal family, is our own internal matter. You have no right to interfere." Ong sat down next to him, leaned against the metal cabin behind him, and said in a low voice, "Listen, kid, it's not that you've been restraining yourselves, it's that we've been restraining ourselves. When we lose control, do you know what will happen? Potts, give me the files on the vampire incident the day before yesterday." Ong flipped the file handed over by Potts to the pages of the statistics and reports of SHIELD and the UPA's vampire cleansing program around the world. He handed it to Blackbat and continued to play it down. "This is an appetizer for the Holy Shield. If you insist, we don't mind playing with the Inhumans. On this planet and the planetary system, we, the Holy Shield, have 100 ways to make you disappear without a trace, just like those vampires. Don't talk to me about the royal family, honor, and traditions of the Inhumans. We're not the useless SHIELD. We're not the useless SHIELD. We're afraid of a mere alien prince, and an adopted one at that. And we're giving him diplomatic privileges. According to the logic of the Sacred Shield, if you commit a crime against humanity, then you deserve to die. What we do most often is to give our enemies an equal and universal death. To be honest, you and your royal family are worthless in our eyes. If you still insist on your so-called familial love and honor, I will send you and your damned family to hell together." Ang's words became more and more unpleasant. Blackbat couldn't help but want to stand up, but Ong pressed his shoulder, making it impossible for him to react. A hand on his shoulder pressed tightly like an iron hoop, making him unable to move even a little. Ong said very seriously, "I always like to say the ugly things first, lest you young people make irreparable mistakes because of a moment of impulse. Don't look at me threatening you with genocide, but we, the Holy Shield, are considered easy to talk to. The Holy Shield was established because of the complexity of dealing with internal affairs, at least in the UPA. We foresee the complexity of the political situation on Earth in the future. Many times, we can't distinguish between friend and foe. We may confront each other in some aspects, but we also need to cooperate in other aspects. Struggle and cooperation are the themes of the future situation on Earth. So we are gentle, mainly responsible for determining friend and foe, and then using this international organization as a platform. We deal with the complicated parts that are difficult to determine friend and foe, forming a united front. Do you know what united front is? Now that we are in contact with you to discuss the problem of the Inhumans, you think my words are unpleasant, but this is how we make friends. If you don't want to make friends, then the Soviets won't talk to you. Do you know how many civilizations are willing to sacrifice everything for a chance to talk? But the Soviets don't talk, and the UPA cleansing fleet doesn't talk, but we will talk, and I'm talking to you now. Once I determine friend and foe here, for example, report that the Inhumans, under the leadership of their new king, have surrendered to the Thanos and joined the Alliance of Salvation. Everything that happens next can be foreseen. They will be handed over to the Soviets to deal with, and the UPA has always dealt with enemies this way. We are facing a great enemy, and we don't have the time and energy to play the game of turning enemies into friends. We like to eliminate problems. Ong put his arm around Blackbat's shoulder. You live on the moon, so you should be familiar with the Soviets, right? If not, I happen to have an internal document of your nemesis, the Kree, your creators. It is a document of their assessment of the fall of their old enemy, the Skrull Empire. The analysis of the Soviets is very clear. A few years ago, on the back of the moon, which is the back of your city, the land of the Dark Moon, the UPA had a relatively large operation, and I don't believe you don't know anything about it. We found traces of an evil god there, the UPA's nemesis, the spawn of the Creator's apocalypse. Among the evil gods, Cthulhu represents water. The deep ones in the lunar sea have had some friction with you, so you should know how difficult it is to deal with evil gods. I know. Blackbat heard the bloodlust in Chun Ang's casual words. He also happened to know some information about the UPA, or rather, the Soviet fleet responsible for fighting in the UPA. For example, they killed people like flies, destroyed planets like drinking water, burned glass, and performed feats of genocide. Blackbat could not control the panic in his heart and clench his fists. One of your giant ships killed that terrible evil god. So we don't want things to develop to this point, Chenong said sincerely. For your race, for peace, kill that brother of yours. He exiled me. Blackbat still resisted. The importance he attached to his family and the rejection of his own ability made him more and more afraid of returning to that position. To him, that did not mean power but responsibility. He was afraid of this responsibility, afraid of killing his own brother. This strong emotion made him reject his own ability more and more. He even pushed the responsibility of his exile to his own ability that he could not control. I can't control my ability and caused great harm to Atlan. I have been exiled. My people no longer recognize me as their king. My brother has replaced everything I have, Blackbat said painfully. I'm no longer Blackbat. That power is ominous and cruel. I will only bring disaster to the Inhumans. You will bring disaster, but what your brother will bring is a disaster of annihilation. Of course, Chenong knew what Blackbat's so-called loss of control meant. It could be said that Maximus was not good at many things, but he could accurately grasp his brother's weakness. He keenly saw through Blackbat's biggest weakness, fear and rejection of his own ability. He colluded with Crow and used the universal tuning fork to amplify the power of the 12 stages of vibrational metal and easily destroyed all anti across the Earth-Moon system. Until now, Blackbat still believed in the fact that he had accidentally destroyed all anti, so much so that he subconsciously tried to deny and forget his own ability. Of course, this was not the result of Maximus's conspiracy, but the result of the psychological trauma that Blackbat had been suffering for more than 20 years. I will help you defeat my brother and stop my people from waging war on Earth. But I am no longer Blackbat. I cannot return to Allantai and destroy Maximus's plot with a wave of my arm. I can only fight side by side with you, but I can't use my ability. Every time I try to use it, I feel like I am about to lose control. If I use my ability again, I am afraid it will destroy everything and cause an even greater disaster. Chenong was silent. He sighed and asked, if you are not the king of the Inhumans and have no superpowers, what do we need you for? We can find a cosmic mercenary group, such as the Guardian of the Galaxy, and send them to the moon to stop your brother's plot. I will not use the identity of Blackbat for anything. Blackbat continued, give me a new identity. This mask is very good. I can use it to make a sound, and no one will doubt my identity. I need a new name. The Batman you mentioned before is very good. Batman, the Blackbat King. No, the freshly minted Batman announced. Chenong glanced at him as if he was sizing him up. Relying on the last bit of mischief he had left, he maintained his interest in the Blackbat monarch and said, so be it. We will train you, give you some equipment, and you will be responsible for beating up that suicidal younger brother of yours. For the sake of your entire family. If you fail, I will be the one to kill you. I will reunite your family. Potts said excitedly. Looks like the Holy Shield has another member. I'll design a new uniform for him. I haven't been a superhero backup in a long time. I was the one who prepared the clothes for Tani's previous events. I'm also in charge of designing his public image. It's not an easy job, and not just anyone can do it. You know Tani's personality, but I've never had the experience of creating a new hero. Just thinking about it makes me excited. It's no use, Chenong said. He can't be a hero. Why? Potts was surprised. He has good qualifications, and I also think he can solve these problems. Chapter 1093. After returning to the headquarters of the floating pyramid, Chenong immediately noticed the abnormality of the headquarters. The top of the pyramid reflected a brilliant golden light. The floating pyramid was located at an altitude of 80,000 meters. The thin air allowed sunlight to shine straight down without any hindrance. The sunlight within dozens of kilometers seemed to be concentrated at the top of the pyramid. Amidst the high-energy light, a ferocious monster with bone spikes all over its body was roaring at the sky from the top of the pyramid. The concentrated sunlight had activated the pollen in the air, causing the pollen to reflect an extremely brilliant pure gold. The golden viral pollen continued to flow into the body of the monster. The body of the monster that the fake eagle I had transformed into was constantly expanding in the middle of the golden energy flow. Soon, it had grown to a height of nearly 3 meters, the weight of a large truck. At the same time, his muscles were constantly contracting, and his body was constantly tensing up. This kind of expansion was not because he was fat, but because he was compressing his muscles. It was a growth that exceeded the limit, and it was an expansion under the most powerful pressure. Every bit of growth was built on thousands of times of tempering and compression. The power it was accumulating made it appear as if it could explode at any moment. Every inch of its muscles was accumulating astonishing power and withstanding unimaginable pressure. The monster roared repeatedly as it endured the pain of its life-form metamorphosis. It suddenly swung its fist at the air before it, and the thin, cold air in the sky rapidly compressed under the punch. The unimaginable speed of the punch compressed the air before it to the limit, and a pale blue plasma appeared in the clear air at high altitudes. The air under high temperature and pressure had produced an ionic phenomenon. The plasma that melted in the air existed for a very short period of time. Most people could only see the ripples that the monster's hammer created in the air. The power of the plasma that was released in an instant was shocking. Just the shock wave from the fist hitting the plasma was already a very scary weapon. Strange tried to stop the monster from becoming stronger, but when he tried to teleport to the monster, the sparkling portal opened behind the monster for less than a second. As if it had eyes on its back, the monster twisted its muscles at an unimaginable speed, its entire body twisting 180 degrees like a rubber band as it punched at the portal. When the punch was thrown, the air in front of the fist was compressed to the extreme, and the friction between the fist and the air produced a high temperature of tens of thousands of degrees, knocking out the outer electrons of the surrounding gas atoms. The plasma formed by the high energy and high kinetic energy of the free electrons had a temperature of millions to tens of millions of degrees, and any matter in front of it would instantly evaporate. In nature, there was only one type of plasma that humans could observe with the naked eye, and it wasn't the concept of a plasma perm, but the energy level of a ball lightning in a 10,000th of a second. That was why the fake Hawkeye's punch was called a plasma cannon in science fiction. In nature, it was a ball lightning, and in martial arts, it was a martial art that could turn thunder into water and shatter the void. In the mystical side, it was a grand fist technique that could break all techniques. Strange only managed to stick a little bit, and half of his body was evaporated. The ring of time in Strange's hand turned silently, causing time to return to half a second ago. He tried to close the portal, but it was even worse this time. The monster's hand directly passed through the closing portal, and this time, Strange was left with only his right hand. Time returned again, and this time Strange wanted to use the time stop to dodge, but he was still saved by the monster's second attack. In a short period of time, the monster had punched out 10 million times, turning the surrounding 5 kilometers into a plasma cloud. It was a sea of plasma, and this time, not even Strange's ashes were left. After Strange was killed by the monster for the 45th time, he finally found a solution. He completely erased the previous mistake, erased the timeline where he opened the portal, and Strange paid a huge price for it. Half dead, he basically lost the ability to fight. When Strange was killed for the 44th time, he gave up resisting and used this short period of time to peek into the future. Therefore, he very frankly gave up and wailed, "If you don't act now, that guy will destroy everything in a minute." But I still don't know what happened. Chun Ong shrugged. There's a problem with the Napayo wind shade. You're right, the stairway of the sun has become active, causing nearby creatures to mutate. I'm guessing it released pollen as a catalyst to infect the scroll corpses. The last time it infected the stairway of the sun, it triggered the blood insectoids that almost destroyed humanity. This time, I'm guessing it will be humanity itself, the corpses. The source of infection must be eliminated as soon as possible. After this stairway of the sun's pollen came into contact with the corpses, it mutated into the virus that produces that thing. If you don't want the earth to be filled with that thing and trigger a zombie tide, you must eliminate it within a minute. Otherwise, after a minute, when it has fully matured, it will turn on the catalyst against the airflow at high altitudes and release trillions of spores that can infect the entire Earth from an altitude of 80,000 meters. The airflow in the thermosphere will bring the spores to the stratosphere and then spread them all over the world. Just like the virus taking a plane with a diameter of about 10,000 kilometers, we will cause the world's largest biohazard crisis. We will create a miracle of a virus breaking out all over the world at the same time. I really don't want this miracle to happen in the history of disease. Strange used the last bit of his strength to finish his words in a few microseconds using the primordial time stone. He looked sincerely at Chunong and exclaimed, "It's time to save the world." After listening to him, Chunong observed the monster for a moment and finally nodded. Kong Keenan wasn't in the headquarters right now. Chunong raised the watch on his right hand and pressed a secret button. 3 alloy needles instantly popped out from the watch and pierced into Chun Ang's skin, connecting to his nerves. In 2 seconds, Chun Ong uploaded his consciousness to the nearby quantum network of the Human Revolutionary Alliance. The vast and magnificent collective consciousness formed by the consciousness algorithms of countless people on the quantum network, the highest intelligence, Will of China, began to review the application he submitted. In a short period of time that was almost meaningless compared to the real world, the application was approved and sent to Chun Ong. The Republic's war machine also opened up a small amount of authority to him. After opening his eyes, Chun Ong glared at Strange. "The trouble you've caused. Wait for 3 days of documents and review when you go back." His consciousness was instantly encrypted into a quantum algorithm and began to be projected into the nearest descendant. Because the descendant of a lower model did not have network connectivity, he had to choose a more advanced model. God Series, Quantum Calculus Information Coverage Descendant, codenamed Fushi, the Big Dipper constellation orbiting the Earth. In the arsenal of one of the armed satellites near the location of the floating pyramid, it was called an arsenal, but it was actually a spatial bubble controlled and maintained by a group of light radiation. In the middle of the spatial bubble, countless high-energy substances formed the chaotic state of matter in the early days of the universe, and these substances were like nebulae surrounding 2 intertwined figures that looked like fetuses. The strange high-energy substances were constantly being converted into a high-energy condensed substance through an umbilical-like device that connected the 2 figures. It was a substance unique to the God Series and the most glorious crystallization of condensed matter physics in the Republic, a strange condensed substance between information and matter, divinity, which provided the material foundation for the creation of the God Series. These were the high-end forces that the Republic was developing. Fushi and Yuan, the 2 embryonic figures, were nearly 4 meters tall. Their upper bodies were either handsome or beautiful, and their lower bodies were intertwined dragon and snake tails. The male and the female's tails were intertwined, and they were sleeping with their foreheads against each other, like a pair of sleeping twins. But in the quantum network, the moment Chun Ang's consciousness algorithm was transmitted, Fushi opened his eyes. He released his entwined tail with Nuwa and left the core of the spatial bubble. He came to the satellite outside, where the automated equipment surrounded him and quickly completed the armor covering. This was the covering of the Descendant. Fushi was placed in a 10-meter-tall prismatic metal cabin and launched towards Earth. In just 2 minutes, a blue streak of light streaked across the sky. Everyone in the floating pyramid saw a blue light rapidly approaching in the sky. A moment ago, it was still far away, and the next moment, it was right in front of them. Even a monster that was undergoing the final infection and mutation raised its head vigilantly. In the next instant, the meteor hit the ground. The dark blue light smashed in front of everyone and exploded at an altitude of 80,000 meters. The light was so strong that no one could open their eyes. In the strong light, dozens of shield-like armors exploded and shot in all directions. They activated and operated, surrounding the floating pyramid as the center, forming a huge energy shield ball with a diameter of 10 kilometers, sealing all the people and resources inside the ball. At the center of the energy sphere, the light gradually dissipated, revealing Fushi's tall and strong figure. Target locked, beginning environmental stabilization correction. Higgs's field constant modification. Gravitons turning invisible. Chun-Ang's consciousness carried on the Descendant of Fushi ordered. Mass effect attack begin. As the Descendant of Fushi's hand, a miniature 8 trigrams appeared. These lights had no practical meaning and were purely added by the designers for aesthetics and to take into account the traditions of the Chinese civilization. With the disappearance of the gravitons, the mass in the sphere of the energy shield disappeared. All the laws of physics based on mass effect began to fail, first speed, then force. Not everything in the universe had mass. The 2 known massless particles included photon and gluon. With this as an example, without mass, there would be no force. Light would not produce any force with any object. In physics, the zombies that were originally carbon-based mutants, in a sense, had become photonic creatures, at least in the sense of mass. Now, all the behavior and movement habits of carbon-based creatures had no meaning, which meant that the monster didn't even know how to move. Its powerful body that surpassed everything had lost its use, just like how even the strongest Hercules couldn't kill his own shadow. But now that the Hercules had become a shadow, the strength he was so proud of was completely meaningless. The zombie monster couldn't even kill an ant. This was the law weapon. By eliminating some of the physical parameters, it achieved the effect of temporarily eliminating the objective laws that made the enemy's attacks effective. Everyone saw that the almost invincible monster was powerless before the arrival of the Fushi level, turning into a meatball that floated in the air. Without mass, there would be no speed. Fushi carefully modified the physical constants of a zombie monster. Through the basic information manipulation ability, it completely eliminated the mass attribute that Higgs's field constant had been modified, and then Fushi gave it the first driving force. Once a massless matter has speed, it must be the speed of light. So the monster shot out in the form of light speed radiation. It became a beam of light that shot out from the Earth into the vast universe. Being in a light speed frame of reference, it was no longer in the same material dimension as all non-light speed matter in the universe. It would always be in the light dimension, independent of the universe in terms of time, space, and matter. It was still in the universe, but already in another dimension. May it achieve the great evolution of life and become a light speed life. The apocalypse would definitely be interested in researching a life that entered the light speed dimension, when time and other meaning no longer existed. When it no longer had any meaning of life, it would break through the almost insurmountable barrier, rethink, and achieve the transformation from carbon-based matter to light-speed matter, and then to light-speed life. The meaning was similar to a stone suddenly developing thoughts and feelings, becoming a life, but the difficulty was billions of times higher. Chapter 1094. That's it. Strange was in disbelief. Fushi walked up to Chun-Ang's body and lightly tapped it, turning the body into a stream of data that was stored in Fushi's AI. Fushi, who was clearly twice as tall as everyone else, turned around and asked, "Is it hard to believe? What did you see in the parallel world?" In the parallel world, We did everything we could. Strange said, we used every method, magic, technology. Even if someone could heavily injure that monster, the monster would recover at an unimaginable speed after that, and that method would no longer work. Strange said, I used the power of the time gem to try and destroy it during the time stop. But no matter how much damage I caused it during the time stop, it would recover in the next instant after the time stop was released. Then, during the third time stop, it learned telepathy and entered the time stop to kill me. After that, I chose to sign a contract with Satan, wanting to drag that monster into hell at the cost of my soul. But 3 days later, hell was destroyed, and what came out of hell was the zombie Satan, who would destroy Earth in 3 minutes. I then tried to form an alliance with Mephitos, borrowing the power of Thanos, to activate Wakanda's weapon known as the Universal Tuning Fork. You know its name? Seems like your cooperation with Crow isn't bad. Chanong smiled. Crow couldn't kill it either. Wakanda's dangerous weapon had once completely destroyed its body, but it soon evolved into a pure spiritual form. Then used vibranium as a body to be reborn. Strange hesitated for a moment, but still asked, You removed its mass and shot it out at the speed of light. I thought it would evolve into a photon creature. Then it would come back to destroy the world. Will that be the case in the future? Chanong asked. Strange pressed his index finger against his temple, gazed into the void for a while, then shook his head. There is no such future. It's a famine-infected, not famine. It's not as powerful as you think, Chanong said. In fact, this infection is a part of famine. The stairway of the sun pollen has mutated into carbon-based life forms, a weapon of destruction that specifically targets carbon-based life forms. It can be said to be a carbon-based life form killer. It has all the evolutionary potentials and possibilities of carbon-based organisms. At the same time, it also has infinite vitality. Even the Human Revolutionary Alliance, after its spores spread out, could only abandon the Earth and destroy this life form along with the Earth. Otherwise, it will evolve endlessly or adapt. Infected, let's just call it a zombie. Infected zombies were able to adapt to any environment at an extremely fast speed. In order to use the unique evolution and adaptability of these carbon-based life forms to achieve the effect of being able to deal with the extremely high variables of intelligent life forms, they had to use it in battles with endless variables. That is why it has to increase its efficiency and speed, which is why it can also learn. In other words, imitate, learn, and evolve from its enemies. It could be an instinct that the famine mutants absorbed from the Skrulls' genes when they mutated. The zombie virus cultivated from the corpses of the Skrulls has the ability to imitate and learn the characteristics of the life forms it knows. And because of its amazing ability to evolve and adapt, it learns from you, evolves, and adapts. That is why your abilities will not have a second effect on it. It may not be ready the first time, but your tactics will be meaningless the second time. But because all of its abilities originate from the unique life form of carbon-based life forms, it can only adapt and imitate carbon-based life forms. The fact that you can master those abilities means that they are suitable for carbon-based life forms. That means you will never be able to defeat the zombie virus, because it can learn everything you know and even surpass it. That is why famine created it, a natural predator against carbon-based life forms. It can learn all your skills in the first round and then get rid of you in the second round of evolution. In the end, it can easily eliminate you. With this kind of self-learning and self-adaptation ability, there is only one way for carbon-based creatures to die with it, and that is superhuman mutation. By creating a non-carbon-based creature and reaching the superhuman mutation point, it can destroy that monster. Strange, however, did not believe it and asked doubtfully, leaving aside how you know all this. If the mutated monster is so terrifying, why is it that the greatest damage it could do to the Revolutionary Alliance in all parallel worlds was to force you to abandon Earth and destroy it along with it? It is the natural enemy of carbon-based creatures, or rather, it is invincible against carbon-based creatures, even the intelligent individuals of carbon-based creatures. However, that is only a weapon against individuals. It cannot deal with the other level of carbon-based creatures' intelligence, civilization. Civilization is the multiplication of all individual variables, or even exponential growth, and no learning ability could deal with such a large number of variables. To a civilization, it is not an invincible enemy, nor is it a weapon created by famine to fight against civilization. It is just a piece of cake. Famine and the other three horsemen are the real weapons created by the apocalypse to fight against civilization, the universe, and everything. It can be said that the seemingly terrifying killer of carbon-based life forms, the zombie virus, is just an insignificant weapon produced by the plague war system. The original intention of producing this weapon is not to destroy civilization in the future, but to eliminate some individuals. Chenong said, "You know nothing about the horrors of our true enemy. It may be the apocalypse to you, with the zombie virus multiplying and turning countless people into the ultimate killer of carbon-based life forms. It may be a calamity to your civilization, but to the Revolutionary Alliance, it is but an insignificant challenge in this war. The enemy we are truly facing is beyond imagination. Open your eyes and look at the multiverse. Under the shadow of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, all universes they wanted to destroy have never been spared. And the resistance of those universes has included everything you can imagine, but it is all useless. That shadow is not a world-destroying crisis, nor is it a dark force that wants to destroy the universe, but an ending, a fate that you cannot resist. This is the corner of the war we are currently in. To the Republic, this crisis is but an insignificant part of the war, something that happens and repeats itself every day. Our situation is just that dangerous. Everyone's lives are hanging by a thread. You think that the peace you see is all we have, but the truth is that the Republic and the Revolutionary Alliance exist in every parallel world. We are being destroyed every day as the universe is destroyed by the apocalypse. Every day we die, a warrior of the universe dies. The peace here is just an illusion of a bubble in the multiverse," Chenong said with a heavy heart. "As for why I know so much about the zombie virus, you can't be thinking that you're the only one who can observe parallel worlds, right? Quantum observation, chaos magic, and parallel world observation are not advanced technologies. This Fushi descendant belongs to the quantum calculus information coverage type and is the model used by the Republic for information warfare. Quantum observation, reading Akashic records, and directly reading and modifying the underlying information of the universe are basic operations. This type of model is called a God series. The God series is based on the authority of God, the result of trying to create a God with technology. The Republic includes the concept of God from all humans and non-humans, intelligent and superintelligent beings. It gathers the understanding of God from all civilizations to create the originals. Because the originals are too powerful, so they have no choice but to divide the authority of God, using different models to carry the different abilities of God. The series was based on ancient Chinese mythology and named different types of descending bodies. Fushi is the carrier of information that represents God's omniscient ability, and his sister Nuwa is the carrier of God's creation ability. So the past and the future, the known and unknown, your thoughts, the changes and unchanges of the universe are no secrets to Fushi, because he is indeed omniscient. The zombie originals that were launched into space in the form of light radiation can't come back. Chenong said, "Even if they do come back, it will be famine. When that time comes, we shouldn't be worried about such a trivial matter. Take me to see Steve. Famine's mutation will change, depending on the carrier. The pollen of the Stairway of the Sun mutated into a zombie virus on the Skrull corpse, transforming the corpse into a zombie originals. But what kind of mutation will happen to the captain is hard to say." At that, everyone present began to worry. They turned to look at Turkara, leaving Black Panther a little embarrassed. He tried to change the topic. "The Stairway of the Sun is so dangerous. We need to find a remaining Dapaya tribe members and learn how to seal and control it." "Seal," Chenong snorted. "Wakanda is in charge of watching over war. Do you have any traditions or methods?" he asked. Vibranium isn't as dangerous as the stairway of the sun. Most people don't even realize that it's a dangerous existence, Tekala explained. Then Dapaya tribe believes so as well. Chenong replied, Are vibranium and the stairway of the sun dangerous? Of course, they weren't dangerous when they were inactive. Then Dapaya tribe even used the pollen of the stairway of the sun to create powerful warriors. But why is it destroying the world now? Is it because we don't know how to control the stairway of the sun? Chenong sneered. It's because the famine has become active. When the war begins, vibranium won't be any safer than the stairway of the sun. Turkle said in shock, You're saying that Wakanda is in a very dangerous situation right now, and that my people might be living next to monsters like the stairway of the sun. The stairway of the sun created the zombie virus. If we hadn't dealt with it properly this time, it would have been a disaster not inferior to the one Inhitian faced. What would vibranium have created then? Strange said solemnly. Think about it. What did Klaus create with vibranium? Chenong prompted. The cosmic tuning fork. Strange muttered in horror. But that's something Klaus created himself. Then who created Klaus? He's a life form made of vibranium, Chenong said. Whether his thoughts were Klaus or vibranium, it's hard to say. It's more likely that when vibranium made him Klaus, he was Klaus. Make him another Klaus, and he'll become another Klaus. Did Klaus' thoughts originate from himself? Who knows? The 5 guardian tribes have never been able to seal or guard the 4 horsemen and the Messiah. It was the 4 horsemen and the Messiah who were guarding them. Do they think they're guardians? In truth, they're just a bunch of prisoners controlled by the 4 horsemen and used to wake them up. They're a bunch of living alarm clocks. Then what's the point of everything we're doing now? Potts asked, maintaining this ancient order, only to discover that it's meaningless. They'll wake up one day. Stop the alarm clock before the bomb explodes. Chenong said nonchalantly. Is there any point in making us run a little further? Chenong returned to the floating pyramid. Strange had prepared a surgical gown for him in advance. Chapter 1095. Looking at the back of Chenong, who was controlling Fushi to slide on the ground, Strange activated time stop. In the stagnant space-time, where all motion had stopped, Strange slowly walked towards Fushi, wanting to observe him carefully, but Fushi turned around in the time stop. Chenong looked at Strange and said with a smile, You want to know my weakness? Strange was silent. He stared in the direction of Steve Rogers, who was lying in the operating room not far away, and said slowly, What happened this time? Was it within your expectations? Chenong asked doubtfully, Why do you think so? Before I obtained the possessed body, I didn't have any extraordinary abilities, and after returning Fushi, I was still an ordinary investigator without many supernatural abilities. Compared to that, isn't you, who can predict everything that will happen here, more suspicious? You, who are guarding the eye of Agamotto and the primordial time stone, are theoretically the one who can predict everything. Yes, it seems that if you want to doubt me, I'm the most suspicious person. Strange said, but I just have a feeling that among all the people in the Holy Shield, no, among all the people I've met, if there's anyone I can't see through, it's only you. I'm not a person who suspects everything and is always on guard against everything, but I still don't feel safe in front of you. The crisis this time has further aggravated this point. In front of you, I can't help but want to find your weakness in case I need it. What a sharp little animal, Chenong said in his heart. Is it because you've worshipped the apocalypse for a long time as the Sorcerer Supreme? So you have a special premonition? That's not a bad thing. Chenong replied. You're very frank, which is a good thing for our team. In fact, none of us should trust anyone, and there's no harm in using a little more brains. We can form a group to gather all the heroes on this planet who have the ability to bring hope and destruction at the same time. Like you, me, Hulk, or a certain professor in Iron Man. We supervise and suspect each other and help each other build a system to deal with us. Once someone loses control, the others can use their own wisdom and abilities to control him, Chenong said. This can be considered a balance of terror that ensures mutual destruction and control. Good idea. Strange laughed. What should we name it? What about the balance of beings association? Chenong suggested. This looks like an organization established by Thanos. Or are we planning to rely on Thanos to maintain the balance of the universe? Strange thought for a moment. Guided by the will of the universe, he suggested jokingly, why don't we call it the Illuminati? The light illuminates everything. I feel like I'm just an ordinary investigator, and I seem to be dragging down the entire balance of terror. Chenong smiled. I don't have the ability to destroy the world. Without the authorization of the Revolutionary Alliance, I have no ability at all. The two of them chatted and laughed as they left the State of Time stop and walked into Steve's ward. Chenong controlled Fushi to come before Steve. Fushi, who was almost twice the height of an ordinary person, had the lower body of a serpent like a dragon's tail. He actually slid before Steve, reached out his hand, and lowered it a little, his palm hovering right above Steve's chest. As Fushi slowly lowered his palm, Steve's body became transparent. Countless nerve electric signals glowed faintly as they moved through the transparent body, allowing everyone to see it with their own eyes. The normal nerve signals were shown as silver, but a large golden haze of light could be seen slowly spreading through Steve's body. The situation is not good. The virus's mutation process has become closely connected with his life force. Steve's body has been modified by the Superman serum, and a mutation of his genes is inseparable from him. The virus has easily infected the Superman serum in his body. After so much time, the virus has long become inseparable from him. His mutation process can no longer be interrupted. His body is rapidly mutating under the infection of the virus. Can you see what the effect of the virus is? Strange asked worriedly. After the pollen of the stairway of the sun infected him, he came into contact with the zombie-infected body. So the virus in his body communicated with the zombie original body, and he lost control and bit Sam. But after all, the zombie virus is only infected by the pollen using the corpse as a catalyst, and he is still a living person, so the mutation process and results of the pollen on his body will be different. The pollen catalyst of the famine mutant will imitate and learn the ability of the Skrull genes when it encounters it, so it can evolve to restrain the opponent in battle according to the characteristics of the opponent's ability to adapt to all environments and enemies, to resurrect after being killed, and to evolve the ability to deal with it. And because the catalyst has become a corpse and zombified, the Superman serum in Steve's body is completely different from the Skrull genes, and he is not a dead person. Fushi began to analyze the information on Steve's body. Steve's mutation must be related to the Superman serum. The energy of the Superman serum comes from gamma rays. Dr. Banner repeated Dr. Erskine's gamma ray enhancement experiment and transformed into the Hulk. So after the mutation, Steve's power must come from radiation, and his body and strength will surpass the Hulk. The enhancement of the serum will affect the spirit of the person, making the kind more kind and the evil more evil. This is analyzed from the data collected from the two successful experiments of the Superman serum. Steve and the Red Skull are like two extremes. The Superman serum is a miracle, and the mutation of the famine mutant is also a miracle. When the two miracles meet, the energy that erupts is unimaginable. This will create a perfect carbon-based life form. If the previous zombie virus is a perfect carbon-based life form killer, then he will be a truly perfect carbon-based life form, with a stronger body and strength than the Hulk, but a perfect person mentally. Perfect person? Strange frowned and asked. Yes. Chenong analyzed. The mutation of the famine will evolve the potential of the test subject, and the potential in Steve's body is the Superman serum. You can see it as the mutation virus first evolving the Superman serum, and then using it to transform Steve, so the characteristics of the Superman serum will also be magnified. Steve became the symbol of the American spirit because he had the potential to be kind. He was influenced by the serum and became the symbol of the American spirit. After the evolution of the serum, his character will also be strengthened, and he will continue to develop in the direction of kindness. He will become a perfect person with a perfect personality. In other words, he, who is already a model personality, will be so perfect that he will not be like a person, Strange looked at Steve and felt a little sad. The most precious thing of a person should be his free will. Even if his personality becomes more perfect because of external forces, I still feel like I have lost a comrade. A person's personality is constantly changing under the influence of external forces. Even if we resist, fate will still change us. If we have to say that we resist the change of external forces, we will still be children with incomplete minds. This is growth, Chenong said. Steve's growth is no different from ours. Although Chenong was talking to Strange, he did not stop his analysis. Steve's evolutionary path is very similar to Kong Keenan's. Kong Keenan's descended body is the most perfect carbon-based life form created by the Republic, while Steve's is a perfect carbon-based life form created by the Apocalypse's transformation path. His data has extraordinary significance to the Republic. Chenong recorded the data, and at the same time, Fushi extracted a sample of Steve's blood. With a faint flash of white light, Strange saw a test tube slowly forming on Steve's chest, and inside it was an unknown blue liquid. He hurriedly asked, "What is this?" Chenong replied, "I recorded the data of Steve's body transformation and extracted the evolved Superman serum. No, it should not be called the Superman serum anymore. It has far surpassed the original version. If the original version was to cultivate and transform a super soldier, then the famine mutation version is to transform a perfect person. It's Superman. This serum should be called the Superman serum. Does this so-called Superman serum have no side effects?" Strange was still worried. It is a mutation caused by famine. If there are no side effects, I don't believe that the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are cosmic philanthropists. Don't worry, the Superman serum is perfect. There are no side effects, creating the most perfect carbon-based life form. Chenong stared at the serum extract and said obsessively, "The only thing to worry about is Steve has more than the Superman serum in his body. He also has the virus from a zombie pathogen. Everyone in contact with the pathogen, especially the injured Sam and Steve, is likely to be infected. I have confirmed that Steve is infected. It's just that the Superman serum is resisting the virus that turned him into a zombie. I was wrong. There is more than one virus on the zombie pathogen. It's just that the fusion of the 2 viruses is too perfect, so I treat them as one. It's a virus that turns corpses into zombies, evolved from the genes of the Skrulls. The one with perfect evolutionary adaptability is another virus. The former is still a zombie virus, and the latter, let's call it the Doomsday virus. The Earth was almost destroyed. The Superman serum will reject the zombie virus because the zombie virus is harmful. It will turn Steve into a zombie, but it will not reject the Doomsday virus that can evolve infinitely and adapt to the environment. The 2 viruses are even coupling." "Oh my God," Chenong exclaimed. "This is really the perfect evolution of carbon-based life forms." Strange reacted and said, "You said that the Superman serum is perfect and will not bring negative effects to Steve. The only thing to worry about is that Steve has more than the Superman serum in his body. That is to say, the Doomsday virus will bring negative effects." From the name, you can see that the Superman serum does not have the characteristics of a virus. It is not contagious, but the Doomsday virus, it is extremely contagious. And the Doomsday virus originated from the mutation of a corpse. The cell consciousness it infects has a strong desire to destroy. It may infect Steve's perfect personality, or at least distort it. Chenong said, "Distorted perfection is far more terrible than imperfection. If there is only the Superman serum, Steve's personality will only be a morally perfect person. But with the infection of the Doomsday virus, I don't know how it will distort Steve's personality. It may be a god who cannot tolerate imperfection, or it may be an emotionless Holy Spirit. We have to help Steve," Strange said anxiously. "Can you remove the Doomsday virus from Steve's body? The virus is already combined with Steve's life base. It no longer meets the conditions for separation. The mutation has already rewritten Steve's underlying data, so I have no other way." Chenong thought for a while and said, "The only way is to enable a backup. Backup? Strange mumbled the strange word. What do you mean by backup? A backup is to restore his information before he was infected. I can observe Steve's information before he was infected and then copy it to the present. After deleting the mutated data, Steve's state will go back to the state before he was infected. You can go back as long as you want. One day, 2 days ago. Wait. Strange gestured for him to stop. He thought for a while and shook his head. No, no, no. You want to copy a past Steve and then completely destroy the present Steve. This is not going back in time to restore the state. This is extracting the old backup and then deleting the present file. You want to kill Steve. You are creating a healthy clone of Steve and then killing the real him so that we can pretend that the clone is him. In a sense, this logic is correct. Chenong said, turning a person's time back to the past one day. Does that mean killing the person in the present? No matter how you look at it, objectively speaking, this is indeed a murder. I can't agree with this method. Strange, who was familiar with the relationship between space and time, felt his hair stand on end. These paradoxes in space and time involve self-identity. He had yet to have a complete understanding of them. As three-dimensional creatures, it was difficult for humans to understand the concept of unchanging space and time of four-dimensional creatures. This required the continued progress of human civilization to find an answer. At least for now, this method still had ethical problems. Thus, it was impossible for Strange to agree to this method. Then there's no way to make Steve return to his original state. Chenong said, we have to accept his change. That's not called returning to his original state. Strange said, clearly, he would rather accept a personality change than accept something as sensational as going back in time. There's another method that might be able to remove the day-destroying virus. Chenong said, although the famine mutant represents the mutated power of life, the way it mutates life is through a method of virus transformation. Thus, the day-destroying virus retains its infectivity and becomes a mutated virus. Only the Four Horsemen can fight against the Four Horsemen. Among the Four Horsemen, there's an existence closer to the virus. Perhaps only its power can solve the problem of the day-destroying virus. Chenong looked at Strange and said calmly, we need the original virus.